Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Salty Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes Media Famous. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Midoriya Izuku is 19 years old, an unremarkable college sophomore in everything aside from the nature of his unremarkability. He's quirkless, at worst, a magnet for bullying. But nowadays he's mostly just a scrawny, shortish young man, easily and quietly dismissed by those around him. He double majors in chemistry and hero studies. He's a member of the Pro Hero Fan Association at his college. He would like to be president of the club by his senior year, but currently some of its members are skeptical of how qualified he is to discuss heroes without having a quirk of his own. Right now, he's content to attend club meetings and contribute whatever he can, most specifically his vast and extensive collection of All Might merch and knowledge. All Might has been his idol since early childhood, and the man's decline in the last decade has not done anything to diminish Izuku's literal hero worship. But a lot of his peers have started to move on to the newer, younger heroes. Even Izuku has his favorites among the new crop. Mostly, he likes the Yui heroes, because that's where All Might went. The Academy is still famous for the talent it breeds, and many of its new graduates are already predicted to be announced as nominees for multiple awards categories at the annual Japan Heroes Gala later in the year. Considering how young most of them are, this is a notable honor. Gravity had quickly stolen Izuku's heart, and he likes Ingenium a lot because of his extreme earnestness. Lemillion is basically unstoppable, and Ground Zero and Red Riot are awesome. They're everyone's favorites, of course. Bakugo Katsuki is actually from the same hometown as Izuku, and Izuku even went to his old middle school, though that was years later. Izuku has been one of his biggest defenders for years even when nobody else really liked him. But now that he's one of the top 5 pros, everyone's jumping on his bandwagon. Even though he wasn't a Yui student, Izuku likes Hawks for the cool factor, though he thinks Hawks' former sidekick turned pro hero Tsukuyomi is cooler. On the flip side, he never really got that invested in the new #1 hero after All Might, Endeavor. Maybe the blow of losing All Might as the symbol of peace was just too bitter at the time. But Endeavor was always such a different kind of hero that Izuku's obsession never kicked off in the same way. Endeavor's son, however, is a different story. Izuku's uncontested favorite after All Might has been, for at least the past 6 or 7 years, the pro hero Shouto. Todoroki had just started to rise up through the ranks when Izuku was entering middle school. The more he did, and the more Izuku learned about him, the more he found himself having the traitorous thought that Todoroki was the actual coolest. This had made him feel guilty at first. All Might was, and would always be, the coolest. But there's just something about Todoroki. The hair, the eyes, the scar, and that quirk. Izuku has spent years analyzing it, pouring hours into research, scribbling away in his notebook. The motive behind his obsession is embarrassing. Todoroki's track record as a hero alone is enough for no one to question why Izuku likes him so much. The #5 pro after Ground Zero, Hawks, Endeavor, and Lemillion. An intimidatingly long and ever-expanding list of rescues and villain arrests, a not insignificant reputation as an eligible bachelor, and one of the most beautiful faces in the hero business. The reasons go on and on. But Todoroki became Izuku's favorite just after his debut, back when Izuku was still in grade school. There's an old video online, newsreel footage, taken just after a fairly large-scale villain attack in the middle of the city. The video is mainly an interview with Endeavor, but the scene of the attack is visible in the background, with heroes still helping with the cleanup. For a very brief moment during the video, Todoroki appears in the background. He had still been something of a nobody at the time, though afforded a bit more attention due to his family connections. But at that moment, nobody was watching him. Nobody saw him stop what he was doing upon noticing a little girl, uninjured but alone, sitting off to the side of the crime scene. Nobody saw him crouch down to talk to the girl, before picking her up and walking out of frame. Izuku had scoured the internet for news articles, before finally finding a tiny footnote in one paper from a small local news outlet, just a couple of sentences, from the mother of the girl. She had been separated from her daughter, taken to the hospital after she'd been knocked unconscious during the attack. Todoroki had personally brought her daughter to her. Right at that moment, Izuku fell. In years to come, people would always point to one of Todoroki's defining features as a pro being his cold and aloof personality. It's part of his allure. But Izuku has always known there's another side to him, as warm as they come. So, naturally, he pretty much flung himself headfirst into revolving his life around Todoroki. Half cold, half hot is the whole reason he became a chemistry major in the first place. He picked up hero studies not as a hobby or afterthought, but hopefully to propel along his ideal career path. His dream is to one day work for the Todoroki Hero Agency, developing support items for Shouto himself. He does like chemistry as well. All the possibilities for theoretical to practical application interests him greatly, and gives his brain an outlet when it starts working overtime. When he's not in class, Izuku has a part-time job on weekends as a university tour guide for his school. He mostly likes his job. The high school kids and their parents don't know he's quirkless, and they usually don't find out over the course of an afternoon. Mostly the parents just have a lot of questions he's not really qualified to answer. And the kids are impressed by him simply because he's in college. At least, they are at first. His standard tour guide uniform of a short-sleeved gingham shirt and khakis is not exactly the height of cool, and he's fairly awkward and easily excitable, even at his best. The illusion of chill older guy usually fades pretty quickly. Generally, they only make fun of him when his back is turned, and not very loudly, so it's not so bad. It's an otherwise typical Saturday afternoon on campus. He's taking a group of high schoolers around the science building to show them some of the facilities. And they're a pretty attentive group, asking lots of questions, although a couple of them have been imitating him and giggling about it whenever he accidentally talks too fast and starts stammering. They don't seem to mean any real harm, and he just smiles sheepishly and reminds himself to calm down and speak at a normal pace whenever it happens. They're in the chemistry building, Izuku's home turf, and nearing the end of the tour when the ground floor suddenly explodes without warning. Izuku has spent his entire life being obsessed with heroes. Now, during his first encounter with real, live villains, his first thought is, I could never have been a pro. It's terrifying. The ground keeps shaking beneath his feet. He can't tell if it's more explosions, or if structural damage to the building has weakened it to the point of collapse. There is smoke everywhere, choking him. People are screaming, crying. Mostly kids a lot younger than him, too young, afraid they're going to die. Izuku's second thought is, I have to get them out of here. He sucks in a lungful of air, coughs violently, and calls out, everyone. Then again, as loud as he can, when no one hears him the first time. Listen, we need to go out the fire escape and get down to the ground. Quickly, people start to take notice, possibly because he seems to be the only one doing more than panicking. Though, to be clear, he is definitely panicking. But he's the only person who knows this building, so he's got to act. He keeps his voice loud, jumps up and down to make sure the kids can all see him as he herds them out of the classroom and down the hall. He's not very tall. He reaches the fire exit door at the end of the corridor and flings it open, to be met by blessed fresh air. The scene outside is a nightmare. Other buildings have been attacked and are on fire. Helicopters already hover above the campus, news crews filming the carnage from a safe height. One at a time, please don't push, he calls, as the kids all start to file out onto the fire escape ahead of him. Thank God, they're going to make it out. He has this thought a split second before the most violent explosion yet rocks the building, knocking him to his hands and knees. Screaming erupts again, but this time it's accompanied by the horrifying shriek of grating metal, as the fire escape begins to tear away from the side of the building right before Izuku's eyes. Half his tour group is already on it. No, he screams, completely helpless, useless, as he watches it fall. And then, someone saves them. There's a crackling, crystalline sound, the most familiar, wonderful sound to ever reach Izuku's ears. It comes a split second before a massive slab of gleaming ice rises with blinding speed, appearing almost out of nowhere to bracket the fire escape, holding it fast and secure against the side of the building. I have it, a voice shouts, and Izuku is wrong. That's the most familiar, most wonderful sound he's ever heard, and he looks and sees him. Beneath the fire escape, looking up at them all, stands their savior, Pro-Hero Shouto. Oh my God, Izuku whispers. Then he realizes he's going to have to save his fanboy meltdown for later, because he can't tell his mom about this if he's effing dead. He jumps to his feet and starts directing the kids back down the fire escape. Wrap your sleeves or your shirts around your hands, he yells, and watch your step on the ice. He knows from his research that Todoroki's ice is cold enough that once exposed to outside air, the surface will begin melting instantly, causing it to become slippery. They've almost all made it onto the fire escape, when one of the last girls to climb on turns to him, weeping openly. You have to get on, Izuku starts to tell her, but she cuts him off. We got separated, she gasps, and I don't see her. I don't think she went down yet. What? Izuku asks. Who? My friend. He feels fear mounting again. He recognizes this girl, because she and her friend were the two that kept mimicking him. He has gotten a pretty good look at everyone as they fled onto the fire escape. He has not seen the other girl. Someone screams from behind them, from inside the building. He says. Okay, go, you need to go. I'm gonna get your friend. You are, just go. He only hesitates for a second, long enough to make sure she starts out onto the stairs, before turning and racing back through the door. It's bad inside. The air is thick and smoky, enough to make his eyes water, and the last blast that rocked the building seems to have crumbled parts of it. Sections of the roof and hallway have caved in, resulting in a huge pile of rubble. And then he sees what he's looking for, and his heart jumps into his throat. There's a girl, struggling and trapped beneath some of the rubble. She must have been one of the last ones in the line to get out, and nobody noticed in the explosion. Izuku rushes to her. Are you hurt? He yells, and she startles so badly upon seeing him that it almost scares him in return before she starts sobbing. He can't even make out any words. Izuku takes a deep breath. Hey, it's okay now, I am here. All Might's catchphrase blunders leaving his mouth, stammered and hardly heroic. But the girl stops panicking long enough to listen to him. More help is on the way. But I need you to tell me if you're hurt. And my leg hurts, she says, and I can't move. The pieces of rubble she's stuck under are undoubtedly heavy. Izuku swallows. Okay, he says, okay, just stay calm and I'm gonna get you out. He doesn't know if he can do it, but he has to try, or at least make her think he can. He can't just let her be afraid. He hefts some of the loose slabs of concrete off the pile as best he can. Oof, those are already nearly too heavy for him, but he'll never be able to do it all at once. His palms get scraped to hell clearing things away, but finally, it's just the last toppled chunk of the wall left. Gritting his teeth against the pain in his hands, he plants his feet, grips the edge, and heaves. Right away, he can tell it's not going to happen. He swears and strains, sweat pouring off him. He swears to himself he'll put in more hours at the gym after this if he survives. But the concrete isn't moving, no matter how hard he pushes. The girl watches him with terrified eyes. Please don't let me die, she begs. I'm not going anywhere. I promise, he wheezes, and then throws all his weight into it. I promise I won't leave you. The concrete starts to shift. Izuku is so surprised that he almost loses his grip on it, but a voice calls out to him to move. He gasps and spins around. He's no longer alone in the hallway. Todoroki has arrived, ice lancing forward to lend support to the crumbled concrete. Before it spikes upward, a protective sheet forming over the girl as more ice pushes the rubble away with sheer force, power unrestrained. Izuku wants to cry with relief and shock. Crawl, Izuku urges the girl, and he reaches out to her as she scrambles free of the debris. He helps pull her, supporting her as she gets to her feet with a wince. Nothing looks broken, but her ankle may be sprained. Okay, you go out the door at the end of the... Look out, Todoroki shouts, and before Izuku can tell what's happening, a wall of ice rises in front of them. But an explosion follows immediately, and the ice barrier simply shatters. In the back of his mind, Izuku registers that something is strange. There is no light, no heat accompanying the blast. But then the dust clears, and all his thoughts are wiped away as he stares down the hallway right at one of the villains responsible for everything. All he has room for is fear. It's hard to tell if the villain is a man or a woman. They're covered from head to toe in some kind of formless, black getup. They raise a hand, or what would have been a hand on a normal person. At the end of their arm is a strange, whirling black mass, like looking down a darkened tunnel. Run, the girl says tearfully. No, Todoroki starts to say. Exit is too far, his quirk is long range, Izuku rattles off in one breath. He just blew up the ice from that distance, and she's injured. We'll never make it. Trying to carry the girl will slow him down too much, and Todoroki can't pick her up and use his quirk at the same time. Izuku pushes the girl behind himself nonetheless. It probably won't do anything to save her. Classroom, Todoroki says under his breath. The black mass at the end of the villain's arm starts to shudder alarmingly. Go, Todoroki throws out more ice, this time aiming for the already weakened support structure of the building. The rest of the hallway crumbles as Izuku and the girl race for the nearest classroom doorway, her arm over his shoulder. He hears the explosion and turns just in time to see a blast of wind send shards of concrete and ice fly. Todoroki is caught in it. He's spun around by the force, his costume tearing to shreds. He staggers, falling through the doorway, and Izuku slams it shut and locks it, for all the good that will do. They have probably seconds, maybe a minute tops, to figure out what to do before the villain blasts away the rubble Todoroki caved in to get to them. Izuku tries to take a deep calming breath and smells, beneath the smoke, a musky, sweet odor. His plan forms. Are you okay? Izuku asks Todoroki. The pro-hero is slumped alarmingly on the floor, leaning against the wall, teeth grit in a grimace as he clutches his right arm. He doesn't seem to be able to stand. Right side, Todoroki says. Can't feel it. Don't think I can use my ice. When the villain comes in, I'll use my left, so you two need to take cover. No, Izuku says hurriedly. He can barely contain his panicked glee over the phrase use my left because Todoroki is talking to him about his quirk. He would be convinced this is a dream if he wasn't so absolutely sure he's about to die. He has to focus. He waves his finger in the air vaguely. Do you smell that? The sweet smell. Yes, Todoroki replies. He's staring, famously recognizable eyes sharp and all attention focused on Izuku, which is something Izuku can't afford to process right now or he'll stop functioning. That's ethylene, he says. It must be leaking from somewhere and it's flammable as hell. Sheet, Todoroki mutters. It's fine, Izuku says, because it's also gonna save us. Todoroki's eyebrows raise. How? Another explosion blasts down the hallway, likely the villain clearing a path to them. But Izuku shudders to think of what would have happened if they'd still been standing out in the open. He needs to move fast, or he might still get to find out. Actually, it's not, exactly, but it's hydrate. Diethyl ether, sure can, he explains, because if he just keeps talking, maybe he can keep calm enough, have the presence of mind to do this. And if they're keeping some in here, which they should be, if I'm smelling ethylene, we can use it to knock this bastard out cold. He looks at the girl stuck there with him. What's your name? Hana, she whispers. Okay. Izuku smiles at her. Hana-chan, I really could use an extra pair of hands to help find this hydrate. Be extra careful, and start looking in that cabinet over there, okay? It will be clearly labeled. Diethyl ether. He spells it out for her just to make sure she's got it. The chemicals in this lab aren't a joke. He hates that he doesn't have time to give the girl safety gear. At least a pair of gloves, but they're already opening shelves, searching frantically. Another explosion goes off outside, and Hana yelps in fright. Hana, do you know what a hydrate is? Izuku calls to her. What? She asks, bewildered. And no. Well, he says, trying to ignore the way his own hands are shaking. A hydrate is just a substance that contains water. They're created by adding water, or its elements, to another molecule. Oh, okay. Hana whimpers. Yep, pretty cool stuff. Izuku says. Another boom, closer. He flinches and keeps going. As so, he croaks. Diethyl ether is a liquid formed out of the vapor phase hydration of ethylene. It used to be used as an anesthetic. You mean, Hana says, it'll put him to sleep. Exactly, Izuku tells her. He glances at Todoroki to see that Todoroki is still watching him intently. His eyes are really beautiful. Izuku has never seen them up close before, only in videos and magazines. There are footsteps outside, and he wrenches his gaze away. A shadow seeps into the room beneath the crack under the door. There is someone standing right outside it. Izuku's heart hammers so hard he is sure the villain on the other side can hear it. As senpai, Hana says, so quiet he can barely hear her. I found it. Izuku reaches out without looking at her, eyes still fixed on the door. He feels a bottle settle into his palm. The door blasts open. With a monumental effort, Todoroki pulls himself upright, planting himself between the civilians and the villain, ready to fight with his bare hands. But then Izuku pops the cap off the bottle, pulls his arm back, and flings it as hard as he can over Todoroki's shoulder. It hits the villain square in the head and shatters. They stagger backwards, and Todoroki charges, lunging clear off his feet to body check them out of the door right as they fire off another explosion from the vortex stump of their arm. It blasts so close to Izuku that it slices a cut open on his cheek, narrowly misses Hana, and blows a gigantic hole through the back wall of the building. Izuku stands there, paralyzed for a brief second, before recovering. Shouto. He flings himself through the doorway and sees Todoroki lying next to the villain on the floor. The hero struggles to sit up, but the villain doesn't move. It worked, Todoroki says, as Izuku rushes to his side. They're passed out. Izuku collapses to his knees next to him. Holy sheet, he whispers. Holy sheet, holy sheet, holy. Hey, Todoroki says, and a steadying hand lands on Izuku's shoulder. Take a deep breath. Slowly, Izuku nods, inhaling deeply. He needs to make sure Hana is okay. He needs to stop trembling. He needs to get out of this effing building. He needs. You saved my life, Todoroki says. Izuku freezes. Then he looks up. Todoroki Shouto is staring at him, his eyes calm but wide, dust and soot all over his face. His perfect, handsome face. He's more beautiful in person than Izuku could have imagined. Even now when he looks more disheveled than Izuku has ever seen him when he's staring out of the pages of some glossy magazine spread. He looks older than he usually does in those photo shoots, too, maybe because of the lack of makeup, or possibly due to the extremely recent near-death experience. He's also huge, up close, not quite as big as his 6.5-foot father, but still tall and broad and sturdy. You just saved all of us, Todoroki says again. What's your name? M-Midoriya, Izuku chokes out. Midoriya Izuku. Todoroki nods. Midoriya. Thank you. Izuku bursts into tears. Without thinking, he flings his arms around Todoroki, sobbing disgustingly into the older man's shoulder. After a second, he feels Todoroki's arm come up, and a warm hand pats him soothingly on the back. It's all right. Now, Todoroki just keeps repeating softly. It's a different kind of reassurance than All Might's, less bombastic, but no less comforting. Izuku just clings to him and cries, and Todoroki doesn't push him away. The other pros find them like that in just a few minutes' time. They bring Izuku, Todoroki, and Hana out to safety, where Hana is reunited with her friend. All the other kids are safe, and ambulances have started arriving in droves. Izuku is almost immediately mobbed by paramedics, and he doesn't even have the strength remaining to say anything as Todoroki moves off in the direction of the other heroes where the news crews are already gathering. His movements, especially along his right side, are still very stiff. The paramedics check Izuku out thoroughly to make sure he's okay and doesn't need to go to the hospital. They bandage his hands and give him water and wrap a blanket around his shoulders. He sits in the back of an ambulance, kicking his feet aimlessly. He can't stop shaking. Nearly a half hour has passed when someone drops down to sit next to him, startling him. It's Todoroki again. Izuku stares at him. The danger is behind them, which means Izuku is now all too acutely aware of the fact that he has to exert the mental effort to form sounds into syllables to make words to speak to Todoroki Shouto in the flesh. Hello again, Todoroki says. Izuku gurgles. Todoroki is there to get looked over by the medics as well, which they do with brusque efficiency, checking his reflexes and any larger injuries. When he's deemed fine, they move off, leaving Izuku alone with him. Alone with Todoroki. Todoroki's costume, shredded on top after the villain's first explosion, exposes a lot of bare skin. Izuku is spiraling. How are you doing? Todoroki asks him. Izuku says, his voice coming out a shrill squeak. How is it possible for a human being to be so attractive? How is Todoroki's voice so low and so nice? I don't know. Todoroki snorts, and Izuku panics internally. He must sound so dumb. Todoroki must think he is an idiot. Yeah, that's fair, Todoroki says. Izuku gapes at him. It is. Villain encounters suck, Todoroki says with a shrug. And that's even when you're trained to handle them. You aren't, but what you did back there. That was impressive. Izuku's face explodes into heat. And then no. He waves his hands frantically. Me, I didn't do anything. You saved everyone on the fire escape. And you made sure we didn't get hit by all those crazy explosions, and you freed Hana-chan. I was wondering where you went, Todoroki says, and Izuku falls silent. I saw you at the top of the stairs. Then the next second you were gone. That's when the other girl came running up to me. She told me you went back to save her friend. I tried, Izuku says, completely ashamed at the reminder. But I couldn't. We would have both died if you hadn't. You went back, Todoroki repeats. And then you were there to save us both, when I couldn't do anything. Izuku ducks his head, his lower lip wobbling. That was just really lucky. It is lucky that you were there, Todoroki says, and then nudges Izuku's shoulder with his own. Guess I owe you. What? Izuku jerks around to look at him. You don't, shoo, Todoroki-san. Todoroki is fine, Todoroki says, with a look that suggests he's trying not to laugh. Todoroki-san, Izuku says again, emphatically. You don't owe me anything. Without you, we'd all be dead. He swallows. Saying it out loud is a bit terrifying. Even after the fact. Yes, Todoroki says, just like I would have been if you hadn't been here. Izuku opens his mouth to argue further and then stops himself at the look on Todoroki's face. He settles for a tiny nod and staring at his feet. Midoriya. Izuku looks up at him again and almost passes out when he realizes how close Todoroki is. It only gets worse when Todoroki reaches over to grab his face, holding Izuku's chin in his hand so he can turn Izuku's head to the side. Todoroki narrows his eyes, peering at the long scratch on Izuku's cheek. They didn't give you anything for that. Izuku shakes his head and Todoroki clicks his tongue in annoyance. Hold on. He clicks open one of the little metal canisters on his belt to procure a square band-aid patch and tiny tube of disinfectant. Painstakingly, he squeezes a little of the paste onto a cotton swab. His hands are very steady, even if they are a bit too big for the task. Izuku watches him, transfixed, and realizes he's got his tongue stuck between his teeth in concentration. Oh, he's so cute. Turn, Todoroki instructs him, and Izuku does as asked. Sorry if it stings. It's okay, Izuku says. He closes his eyes as Todoroki gently swabs at the cut to clear away the blood and grime. The disinfectant stings a little, but then fades to a tingly coolness. Todoroki finishes up by affixing the bandage over the cut. His left hand is warm as his fingers brush Izuku's cheek, just barely. Be sure to put more disinfectant on it when you change the band-aid, Todoroki tells him. Okay, Izuku whispers. He can't manage to get any more volume to come out than that. Thank you. Do you have your phone on you? Yes, Izuku says, surprised. Can I see it? Speechless, Izuku fishes his phone out of his pocket and hands it over. Todoroki fiddles with it as he nervously watches, before handing it back a moment later. Izuku stares at the screen. Todoroki has created a new contact for himself, Todoroki Shouto, and a phone number right there in Izuku's phone. Todoroki Shouto just gave Izuku his phone number. Can I trust you with that? Todoroki asks him. Izuku nods lightning fast, staring down at his phone in shock. Good. Text me if you want, so I can save your contact. I'll be in touch. W with me? Izuku asks. No, Todoroki says, with the other guy who saved my life today. All right, Izuku stammers. Todoroki pats him on the shoulder again and then stands, ready to depart. Izuku needs to say something. Anything. Todoroki starts to cross the grass. Todoroki-san, wait. Todoroki turns. Izuku hops to his feet, out of the back of the ambulance, and bows as low as he can without toppling over. He struggles to get the words out. I wish it could have been under better circumstances, but I'm so glad I could meet you. Todoroki nods. You know, he says, in retrospect, I don't mind the circumstances all that much myself. Take care, Midoriya. He bows, then, not quite as low, but respectful all the same. Then he waves goodbye and is gone, soon swallowed up by mobs of more important people who need him. In his wake, Izuku feels like he is floating. All the people bustling around seem to have forgotten him, so he starts on the trek back to his apartment. He needs to call his mom. Surely she's seen the news by now. He looks at his phone again and realization sets in once more. Todoroki said to text him. Oh God, Izuku murmurs. His hands are shaking again, maybe even worse than they had when he was being attacked. Oh, geez, okay, I just gotta do this. He taps on Todoroki's contact and sends a very quick and hopefully not embarrassing message. Hi, Todoroki-san. This is Midoriya. Thank you again for everything. He's already back in his apartment by the time he gets a response. It sends his heart up into the stratosphere once again. Hello, Midoriya. I should have said back there, I'm glad we could meet today, too. Izuku touches his fingers to the band-aid again. He imagines he can sense the lingering presence of warm fingers there. It makes his head spin, and his chest feels light and like it's being tightly constricted at the same time. He might have almost died today, but Izuku has never felt happier, because now he's had the chance to see for himself that Todoroki Shouto is every bit the hero he has always believed in. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. Izuku's phone wakes him up the next morning, shortly before his alarm. Half asleep, he pats his covers in search of it, answering it without even glancing at the caller ID. Hello, morning, Midoriya. Izuku nearly drops his phone as he bolts upright in bed. TT2, sorry to call you so early. Todoroki-san. He screeches. What? How? Good morning. WHY? Are you calling me? He's still asleep. That's it. He must be dreaming. That's the only explanation possible for Todoroki's voice in his ear before 8 a.m., so husky and warm and low. Oh dear, I wanted to give you a warning. Todoroki says. Have you seen the news yet? The news? No. Izuku blinks in confusion. 1 second. He doesn't have a TV in his tiny apartment, but he grabs his laptop, fumbling to keep the phone caught between his shoulder and cheek as he boots it up. He should probably just put it on speaker, but he still can't really believe that it's Todoroki on the other end. Izuku doesn't really want to put the phone down and have Todoroki talk to him from farther away. Okay, he's being creepy, isn't he? He doesn't know which news site to check, so he just pulls up NHK World to look at the homepage. For what feels like the 100th time in far too few hours, his heart skips several beats too many. Why? Why am I? His eyes feel like they're bugging out of his head. Why am I on the front page of the news? Todoroki says. It's true. News coverage of the villain attack from yesterday is plastered all over the homepage. But for some reason, one of the primary stories seems to be the one about himself and Todoroki facing the villain in the chemistry building. There's a video taken from one of the helicopters he saw, of him trying to get people onto the fire escape. Todoroki showing up to use his ice to save it from collapsing. Then the camera zooms in on Izuku talking to the girl before turning and running back inside the building. There's multiple headlines, videos, articles. Heroic university student saves 24 lives. Who is Midoriya Izuku? Man evacuates people from collapsing building. And finally, quirkless boy wonder rescues seasoned pro. Oh, he says softly. Midoriya. Izuku doesn't respond at first, too busy staring at the headline. Todoroki prompts him again, questioningly, and he shakes his head to clear it. The tone of some of the articles leaves a sour taste in his mouth, like what happened makes Todoroki less than capable, just because Izuku doesn't have a quirk. Nothing, he clenches a fist in his blankets. They found out I was quirkless. That, Todoroki says. I think that may be why the story blew up in the first place. I wasn't expecting it to gain this much traction, or I would have warned you yesterday. Izuku utters, a little whine in the back of his throat. I'm sorry. There's a brief silence on the other end of the line that feels like it lasts slightly longer than it should, before Todoroki asks, why are you apologizing? You didn't know I was quirkless, Izuku says, and I didn't tell you, and now. There was no reason for you to inform me, Todoroki interrupts. I should be the one apologizing. And no, it's fine. I know that kind of thing is private, Todoroki continues. But I don't think most people are thinking about it in this instance. And I don't care if you're quirkless. Izuku sucks in an unsteady breath. You don't? Not at all. Izuku knows, he's known, with every fiber of his being, that Todoroki is a good person. He's always believed that. But this one tiny thing that Todoroki has acknowledged and accepted about him is so personal. It's so different from knowing Todoroki jumps into burning buildings to save civilians. It's something he's done only for Izuku. Izuku is grateful. How did people even find out who I am? He asks tentatively. Todoroki says. And for the first time since they'd met the night before, he sounds unsure of himself. I told them. You did. Izuku asks. But why? Because I can't take credit for everything, Todoroki tells him. And because I wanted people to know who you are. After what you did, you deserve at least that much. Izuku can feel his eyes welling up already. Geez, the sun's barely in the sky and he's already crying. I'm sorry if I overstepped, Todoroki says. No, Izuku swipes at his watery eyes. I still can't really believe all this happened, but it does mean a lot to me, Todoroki-san, that you thought of me. There's a soft huff on the other end of the line. Was that a laugh? Midoriya, I haven't done anything but think about you since last night. Izuku has dropped the phone this time. When he picks it up again, his cheeks on fire, phone slipping in his sweaty hands, Todoroki mercifully does not seem to have noticed and is still talking. Saved 24 people. You didn't hesitate. Someone I know who I admire a lot used to tell me when I was still in school. That's the mark of every great hero. Izuku doesn't know whether to be more giddy over his praise, or the fact that Todoroki has been thinking about him. He keeps scrolling through news articles, some of his awkwardness fading as the surrealism of the moment starts to sink in, when there's a knock on his door. Oh, 1 second, he says, hopping off his bed. There's someone at the door. Midoriya. Wait, Todoroki starts to say, but Izuku is already opening the door, phone still held to his ear. 1,000 blinding flashbulb pops go off in his face, leaving him stunned and somewhat terrified. Midoriya-san, cries one of at least a dozen reporters, all with mics pointed straight at him, cameras rolling to capture his every move. Can you give us a quote about your daring rescue on campus yesterday? That sounds like what I called to warn you about, Todoroki says. The last shot the reporters get before the door slams in their faces is Midoriya Izuku, wide-eyed, in a set of official Shouto hero uniform pajamas that are slightly too big for him. Todoroki-san, he whispers, leaning against the door and gasping for air. He can still hear the clamor outside his apartment, people shouting his name. Help me, don't panic, Todoroki says, I have a plan. The plan turns out to be a joint interview on one of the most popular variety shows on Japanese television. Izuku isn't really sure how he manages it, maybe by throwing around his agency's considerable weight. But Todoroki stops the media from harassing him in the interim before the interview. They arrange for filming to occur on a day when Izuku doesn't have any early classes. The morning of the interview, he arrives by train, following Todoroki's very detailed directions. The studio is unbelievably bright and loud and he's already sweating in his suit, maroon, with pinstripes. It clashes horribly with his shoes. The receptionist at the desk is distracted by multiple phone lines and doesn't immediately look up when he nervously introduces himself. Who are you here to see? She asks vaguely. Todoroki Shouto, Izuku asks, feeling clueless himself. Todoroki had said to ask for him, but Izuku is suddenly sure that everything he is doing, currently, is wrong. The receptionist looks up at him. Oh, she says. Oh, you're Midoriya-kun. Sorry, I'll buzz you through. Just go around the corner there to the elevators and up to the 6th floor. He pushes through the turnstile once she's unlocked it and does as asked. His knees knock together the whole way up to the 6th floor. The elevator dings and the doors slide open and Izuku's panic grows tenfold. There's tons of people there, very stylish, busy-looking people, with high heels and sleek hair and holding clipboards. This contrasts with Izuku in every way possible. He is wearing sneakers, his hair is a bird's nest, and he has absolutely no clipboard of which to speak. He wonders if there are extras around, if it would go unnoticed if he just snagged one when no one was looking. He needs a safety clipboard. Midoriya, over here, a voice calls out, and he turns and sees Todoroki standing there. Izuku is fairly sure he dies and ascends to heaven in that moment. True, the other day he'd thought that Todoroki couldn't have looked better than he did, disheveled and grungy from the fight. That was probably a combination of shock, delirium, and adrenaline, however, because now Izuku sees that he was a fool. Interview-ready Todoroki is a whole different beast, and that beast is dangerous. Todoroki isn't wearing a suit, just a slim-fitted dark navy blazer with a white button down underneath. His trousers, also navy, hug his long legs. The shirt is some thin, soft material that clings to his chest distractingly, and the top buttons are undone, so the skin of his collarbone and a little lower peeks through, exposed. The watch on his wrist is a bit chunky, but not unattractively so, and looks incredibly expensive. His short hair is combed back off his forehead, swept over from right to left so that more white than red shows. He looks simultaneously more casual than Izuku and yet a million times more put together. And the outfit, with its tailored lines and clean cuts, really shows off just how big he is. Taken all together, this is, in Izuku's opinion, 100% more life-threatening than a villain attack could ever hope to be. Good to see you again. Todoroki greets him as Izuku joins them. Why you, too? Izuku stammers. Did I overdress? I wasn't sure what to wear. A stylish woman in glasses standing next to Todoroki eyes Izuku like a hawk. He recognizes her a moment later as Todoroki's manager. When she taps her clipboard with her pen, he has to resist the urge to hide. Should we get him into hair and makeup? She asks. It's nearly time to go on. Todoroki's face molds into the sort of hardened blankness he exudes when he disagrees with something. Izuku has seen him do it in a million interviews. He's fine, Todoroki tells her. Here, he reaches for Izuku, who stands very still and tries not to make any sudden movements. Todoroki tugs his jacket off his shoulders and passes it to his manager, and then after a moment's consideration, removes Izuku's bow tie as well. His mouth twitches. Top button, he says. Oh, all right, Izuku says, hands flying up to undo the button under his throat. Todoroki nods. Better. An assistant scurries up to the two of them to tell them they can proceed onto the set. Ready? Todoroki asks Izuku. Izuku erupts into nervous giggles that he has to work very hard to stifle. No, this time, Todoroki does actually offer him a tiny smile. It'll be over quick. Promise. The set, like the rest of the studio, is very brightly lit. Izuku and Todoroki are led to a blindingly white couch where their hosts, an energetic comedy duo, greet them exuberantly. Todoroki is a fairly frequent guest of theirs, and they genuinely seem to know him well, wasting no time teasing him about something or other, some old inside joke. They're very engaging. Even Todoroki cracks a smile here and there, seeming very much at ease. Midoriya, let me introduce you, Todoroki says, and the two turn their attention to him, beaming in welcome. This is Kanda-san and Mori-san. They were kind enough to fit us into their schedule on short notice. Kind enough, Mori exclaims, eyes wide. I thought Kenta-kun was pulling my leg when he told me you asked for an interview. I thought hell had frozen over. He accused me of doctoring your voicemail. Kanda protests, very indignantly. I still haven't recovered from his first interview, Mori says. Do you remember that? The one where, why you made it a game. Izuku chimes in, clapping his hands together in delight, to try and make him smile, but he didn't. The other three all turn to stare at him, and he realizes, too late, that he's given himself away. You remember that? Todoroki asks, as all the blood drains from Izuku's face. But before he can shrivel and die of embarrassment, Kanda and Mori both start roaring with laughter. I can't believe there's still someone who remembers that. Kanda crows. Besides us, that is. You want to know a secret? Mori whispers conspiratorially to Izuku. He smiled as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. Really? Izuku asks eagerly, curiosity winning out. He is stunned. He never knew this about that interview. This is true behind-the-scenes knowledge of Todoroki Shouto. I knew what they were trying the whole time, Todoroki says dryly. A friend found out and warned me. It was unfortunate luck having Earphone Jack on the show right before you, Kanda admits. But we had fun, just like we will today. Ah, they're signaling. Feeling much less panicky, Izuku takes his seat beside Todoroki on the couch. Welcome back, welcome, Kanda says, enthusiasm bubbling out of him. Next up, we have two incredibly exciting guests who have caused a big stir these past few days. I think everyone will be very familiar with one of our favorite returning guests, Todoroki Shouto. Todoroki nods at the camera stoically as the audience cheers and claps. But our second guest is very new to being a hero. Please fondly welcome Midoriya Izuku. Izuku is on his feet reflexively before he can stop himself, bowing awkwardly and exhaling a nervous thank you for taking care of me. Immediately, their two hosts start laughing about this, comparing it to Todoroki's barely there acknowledgement. Amazing. He really gives you this feeling of gratitude. That's true. But then Todoroki-san. The studio audience laughs uproariously as Todoroki stares back at them impassively. Izuku waves his hands frantically. I'm sorry. No, it's because I'm really nothing like a hero, he tries to say. I'm just very honored to be here. Ah, so Todoroki-san must not be very honored then, Mori says with a wicked twinkle in his eye, and Izuku starts stammering in despair. Before he can apologize any further, Todoroki grabs the back of his shirt and tugs him back down onto the couch. I told him you were nice, so don't tease him, Todoroki says, with something approaching an admonishment in his voice. The hosts capitulate readily, but he still plants a hand reassuringly on Izuku's shoulder. Besides, it's all right. I don't mind that he keeps showing me up. Izuku gapes at him as everybody laughs again. Finally, now that pleasantries have been exchanged, the hosts move on to conducting the actual interview portion. Izuku discreetly tries to wipe his hands on his pants. His palms are as sweaty as they've ever been, and he can feel perspiration gathering at his hairline. He wishes he had a handkerchief handy, but it's too late for that. First things first, you had a special announcement you wanted to make. Mori prompts. Todoroki nods. Yes, I just found out I was nominated for the Rescue of the Year award at this year's annual Japan Heroes Gala. I'm really grateful for everyone's support. There are a lot of OS from the viewers. Izuku is among them, although the noise he makes is more of a squawk of excitement. Congratulations, Todoroki-san. He yelps. He knew Todoroki would get nominated for something, and this is one of the most prestigious categories. Todoroki gives him a tiny, fond smile. I'm sure I owe that nomination to you. Izuku's brain cannot compute this outright. Speaking of that, Kanda cuts in, pointing at Izuku. Midoriya-kun. The entire nation of Japan wants to know more about you. You're an ordinary university student? Yes, very ordinary, Izuku confirms, drawing another laugh from the audience. Before the attack, that day was just a day like any other for you, Kanda says, and now his tone has changed to that of a storyteller's. A hush falls over everyone as he helps Izuku weave the tale for the cameras. Can you talk us through that, up to when the attack started? That's easy enough for Izuku to do, and he finds himself settling again as he tells them about his school, what he majors in, and his job. He explains that he likes showing the groups of touring students around and answering their questions, although sometimes he wishes he could be less awkward. Kanda notes, so you're saying, usually people expect you to be intimidating, but actually, they make you feel nervous. Mori chimes in, kind of. He's more afraid of you than you are of him. I'm literally always more afraid, Izuku says, covering his face with his hand. But, Mori says, leaning forward, nearly on the edge of his seat, when the building you were in was attacked, we can show the viewers what that looked like. A large screen behind them comes to life with images of the chemistry building from that morning. Flames and smoke pouring out of the first-floor windows. The audience murmurs in shock and Mori turns back to Izuku. Midoriya-kun, can you tell us what happened? Oh, sure. To a rapt audience, Izuku relays the story. How he basically freaked out with everyone else at first. How the smoke started to choke him, and the floor started to sway beneath his feet. How he realized, eventually, that none of the high school students he was watching could be expected to take charge, and how he led them outside. Incredible, Kanda says. And Todoroki-san, it was about then that you showed up, wasn't it? Right, Todoroki says, and begins to tell his side of the story from that point onward. So, this is where everyone wonders exactly what happened. And Todoroki-san, maybe you can clarify. The kids had all made it to safety when Midoriya-kun ran back inside the building. Yes, Todoroki says, because they weren't all safe. There was one still trapped inside. What? Midoriya-kun. One of the girls had gotten stuck under some rubble, Izuku confirms. It's so lucky she wasn't seriously hurt. I think I've seen some interviews with her. Hana-chan. Yes, Izuku nods. I went back to help but I couldn't. This part is still a bit hard to dwell on, and his throat starts to close up at the memory. He remembers staring into a young girl's frightened eyes and thinking she must realize she's going to die, all because he hadn't been strong enough to do anything. The concrete was too heavy, I thought. That's when I got there, Todoroki says, taking over. Izuku exhales slowly. Relax. The other kids told me what happened, so I came in after them. I got there just in time to hear Midoriya saying he wouldn't leave, even though he couldn't do anything. Mori presses. Why? The question is directed at Izuku. He swallows, hesitates. She would have been alone. Another murmur goes through the audience as Mori's eyebrows raise. I know there's no recording of what happened inside the building, Todoroki says, but I heard him promise not to leave. I think he would have stayed even if he had to face the villain by himself. But, Kanda says, doesn't that mean Midoriya-kun would have? Yes, Todoroki says, blunt as always, he'd have died. There is a very long period of silence, during which Izuku mostly stares down at his hands in his lap. I think we can all say, Mori eventually speaks up, that we're glad you were willing to take those risks. In fact, we do have a message for you. For me, Izuku asks, dumbfounded. The large screen that has been showing footage of the attack changes to a different image. The inside of someone's home, it looks like. Two girls wave out at the audience, and Izuku yelps, Hana-chan? It's Hana and her friend, the one who told Izuku she was still trapped inside the building. They both seem to be having a hard time not lapsing into giggles, but Hana regains control quickly in order to talk. Hello, Midoriya-senpai, she says brightly. Hi, Izuku says, waving back. It's pre-recorded, Kanda tells him in a stage whisper. Izuku freezes with his hand in the air, face going hot, as the audience laughs. Akemi and I wanted to tell you, Hana continues, that you were awesome. Even though it was so dangerous, you were really brave. Also, she twists her hands together nervously, before bursting out, we're both really sorry that we laughed at you before. Please, forget about that, because you're actually really cool. She glares determinedly into the camera for a second, like she's daring him to argue. Izuku laughs at this, stunned. He is very much not really cool, but he appreciates the sentiment immensely. I'll never forget that you came back for me, Hana says. Thank you. The message is a short one. Hana is already waving goodbye, and the screen is going blank again. Izuku, however, just sits there, too stunned to know how to reply. Midoriya-kun, Mori says finally, surprisingly gentle, this all doesn't sound to me like you're always afraid. That's the thing, Izuku stutters, because it all seems very grand, but when it comes down to it, I don't think I've ever been more scared in my life. I really don't know how pros do that all the time. He glances at Todoroki, feeling grateful all over again, and is startled to find Todoroki staring at him just as attentively as everyone else, even though he was there and knows this part of the story. Being a hero doesn't mean never feeling afraid, Todoroki says, more to Izuku than to the cameras or the audience. Kinda hums. True, so true. So now, the two of you are both in the building with the villain. What happens next? Retelling this part of the story to such a captive audience is honestly a thrill. Izuku gets overly excited describing the way Todoroki had removed the rubble and shielded them from the first explosion, and everyone gasps at the last-second rescue. His explanation starts to veer a bit too much into the technical side of things. The villain had been explained, later on, to cause explosions using sound wave frequencies, which was fascinating when Izuku wasn't in danger of being murdered by it. And then there was the marvel that was Todoroki's ice, density, temperature, cryogenic structure. The hosts gently steer him back towards the account of the actual events. So then, Kinda says, I think this is the most amazing part of the story to me. You saved everyone with chemistry. Izuku laughs sheepishly. Not exactly. I wasn't mixing chemicals or anything like that. That's, Hollywood stuff. It wasn't quite that, no, but he thought. Incredibly fast, Todoroki muses, recalling the moment. Even before that, he had a good handle on our weaknesses, the villain's strengths. I remember thinking, who is this guy? The audience laughs pleasantly, and Izuku ducks his head as a whole rush of something he's not used to feeling comes crashing over him. Todoroki had acknowledged his quick thinking. He's second to no one in that area. Well known for being one of the most well-collected and fastest-acting pros in a crisis. For him to have thought that highly of Izuku, it makes Izuku feel genuinely proud of himself. Wow. Perhaps sensing that Izuku is far too overwhelmed to talk, Todoroki continues. After I got hit, I was basically useless. I thought I could use my fire, but turns out that would have probably killed us. He looks contemplative. I don't think there was any way out of that room. The other pros didn't get there for another 4 or 5 minutes, and by then it would have been too late. But Midoriya-kun found a way, prompts Kinda. Todoroki explains how Izuku had figured out the connection with the anesthetic, and how he and Hana had searched for the diethyl ether. Hollywood, Mori shouts, breaking some of the tension built up from such a harrowing tale. That's completely Hollywood. To be honest, I could barely believe it either, Todoroki admits. But he just kept talking. He kept Hana calm, despite everything. I could see how scared he was, but he kept trying to smile. And I just got this feeling from him, like I could trust him with my life, and that he'd get us out. Lots of oohs from the audience follow this statement. Todoroki tells the rest of the story as Izuku stares at him, speechless, unable to believe what he just heard. Amazing, Kinda says, when he's done. Really amazing, isn't it? The audience claps their agreement, and Izuku tries again to execute an awkward bow from his seated position. One thing I kept thinking while listening to that was, how did Midoriya-kun know to do all those things? And I think one reason is because you're very interested in heroes, right? Yes, Izuku nods, having somewhat recovered from before. It's kind of a hobby of mine, even outside school. But you, and correct me if I'm mistaken, are quirkless, aren't you? Izuku had expected this to come up. Todoroki starts to interject. I don't know that that's relevant too. It's okay, Izuku tells him quickly. It's not a thing he advertises, but he doesn't like to seem embarrassed of it either. It's just who he is. I am, yes, quirkless, I know it's unusual. When I was still really little, I wanted to be a hero more than anything. And, well, I couldn't, of course. There are some sympathetic noises, and he waves his hands hurriedly. But it made me really, really interested in them. I've always thought heroes are amazing, so I wanted to study them, and who knows, maybe at some point I'll still be able to get involved in some other way. More applause follows his words as the hosts commend him for pursuing his dreams in the face of great adversity. It's kind of embarrassing, because it's not like he's the only person who's ever had to make the best out of bad luck before. But it is also nice to not be told he's on a fool's errand. So you know everything there is to know about heroes, then? Kinda says. Yeah, kind of, Izuku says. He grins shyly. I'm pretty good at impressions, too. Though, Mori exclaims delightedly. Do some, and we'll try to guess. Okay. Izuku draws a blank at first. It's not often people actually want to see his hero impressions. He goes for the first one he can think of, steeples his fingers, smiles brightly, and says, everyone, do your best and we'll all get through this together. The whole crowd UOS, and Mori actually shouts in shock. He points at Izuku. Iravity, he says. That was totally the anti-gravity hero, Iravity. Yes, you got it, Izuku says, beaming. Okay, what about? He makes his arms stiff and movements robotic as he says sternly, your evil doing stops here, villain. You won't get past me. That's ingenium, Kinda says. 100%. How does he make even his face look like them suddenly? Mori wonders. Maybe he does have a quirk. There's a snort from next to him, and Todoroki puts a hand over his mouth, but not quite fast enough to hide the smile growing there. He's making Todoroki laugh. Keep going. Be relentless, Midoriya-kun. Everybody wants one more, so Izuku thinks hard before going for broke, adopting a ferocious grin and growling out, "I'll kill you. Die, scum. It's ground zero. Ground zero is here. Everyone, stop laughing. Stop laughing immediately, or it will be bad." The whole audience is in an absolute uproar. The hosts are pretending to cling to each other in fright, and Todoroki gives up, putting both hands over his face as he dissolves into laughter. The hosts jump out of their seats and start telling the cameramen to zoom in on this rarest of sights, as Todoroki tries to turn away from them. It takes a very long time for things to calm down again. Izuku can't stop smiling. He made Todoroki laugh. He has a playlist of interviews saved where Todoroki smiles, but outright laughter is so rare he can count the number of videos on one hand. Now there will be one more. It's almost time for us to wrap up, Kanda says. But before that, I have to know, who is your favorite hero, Midoriya-kun? It has to be Shouto, Mori says. Ah, yes, he's my second favorite. Izuku confirms. Second, Mori gasps, like he's been personally offended. Kanda puts a comforting hand on Todoroki's shoulder, which Todoroki just stares at. Belatedly, Izuku realizes his grave mistake. He gasps even louder than the host. No, stay strong, Todoroki-san, Kanda says. Todoroki shakes his head, amused. He doesn't have to say I'm his favorite. But, Todoroki-san, I admire everything about you. Izuku tries to clarify, somewhat desperately. I've looked up to you for years. It really is no competition between Todoroki and the rest. He likes other heroes, but he adores Todoroki. What do you admire most about him, Midoriya-kun? Kanda prompts. Really, everything, Izuku says. And his face is going red, but he has to explain properly. I always thought he seemed like he wanted to be a hero. Just to help other people. Izuku fidgets in his seat. There's a lot he wants to say. A lot built up inside him from the years and years of observation and idolization, crystallizing with utter clarity the past few days. He might not ever talk to Todoroki again after this interview. This is probably Izuku's one and only chance to tell him the things he always wanted to say. He takes a deep breath and turns to look at Todoroki. I've been a fan since you became active, so I've watched you since the beginning, Izuku says, the very beginning. I remember you, from Yui's sports festivals, but I think the first time I heard about your work as a pro hero was the fight against Razor Edge. Oh, that is far back, the hosts confirm as the audience makes some noises of amazement. I think what amazes me most is how hard you always work to reassure people, Izuku continues. You've mentioned how that kind of thing was difficult for you at first, because you weren't very outgoing. But I think it's obvious how much you care about your fans and the people you helped. And now I got to see that firsthand. I can't believe how nice you actually are. Even your smile is. It makes me so happy. I know some people still like to say you're cold, but even before I knew you, you always made me feel safe. Izuku trails off, realizing too late that his infatuation is palpable in everything he says. Todoroki is silent, watching him with a frighteningly unreadable expression. The hosts also seem quietly stunned. Also, I have your entire figure series collection. Izuku bursts out, even the limited edition models. The one saving throw is the mark of a true fan. Actually, he has a lot more than just models. His Shouto memorabilia collection is as vast as his All Might one, although somehow even more embarrassing. In his defense, he discovered Todoroki right around the very fraught days of his teen years. And Todoroki is very attractive. There are some fan comics Izuku has tucked carefully away that he would not want anybody to find. Ever. I take it back, Kanda says, breaking the silence. Clearly you have a very high opinion of him. Izuku nods, emphatic. I do. Todoroki finally blinks, his pretty eyes very wide. Midoriya. He's my favorite active pro hero. Izuku rushes to clarify. The reason I said second is because my first favorite hero has always been All Might. I wanted to be just like him when I was younger. Todoroki says. I think I can handle placing after him. Izuku smiles at him, relieved, and he smiles back. What made you want to be like All Might? Kanda asks. This is Izuku's oldest memory. I wanted to save people, he tells them. With a smile. The hosts nod understandingly. I sense a common thread, Kanda says. And now, I think, you can say you've achieved it. We are so sadly out of time for today, but thank you both for joining us this morning. Thank you so much for having me, Izuku says, before turning to Todoroki. Thank you for inviting me. They wrap up after that, but get to spend a little bit more time chatting with the hosts and more of Todoroki's team. The scary, stylish, bespectacled manager seems to have warmed to Izuku considerably, and seems very pleased with how well he knows Todoroki's brand and history, which Kanda and Mori keep randomly quizzing him on. Todoroki keeps trying to make them knock it off, which only encourages them more. Izuku is enjoying himself so much that he almost forgets the time. It's an errant glance at his phone that makes him squeak a surprised exclamation and start apologizing to everyone as he hastily makes his goodbyes. I should go if I want to catch the next train back. I'll be late for my afternoon class otherwise. We can arrange a driver for you, Todoroki says. Eiko, his manager nods, already making a call. Shouldn't be more than 3 minutes. Is that all right, Midoriya-kun? Oh, yes, that's really generous, Izuku says. Having Todoroki and his team go out of their way for him makes him feel extraordinarily guilty. But it's already in motion, it seems. They're very efficient. They bid the show hosts a last farewell and head down to the lobby. A sleek black car is already waiting at the curb, and Izuku is already wondering if it will be too embarrassing to roll up to campus inside it when Todoroki walks around and gets in behind the driver. Izuku jumps in the back on the passenger side. Why, you're coming with me. Your university isn't much out of the way of my agency, so I thought I might as well, Todoroki says. Would you rather go separately? No, Izuku gasps. This is okay. All right, Todoroki says. To the school first, Todoroki-sama. The driver asks. Yes. They're both quiet for a few awkward moments as the car pulls away from the curb. Izuku sneaks a glance over at Todoroki to see the hero is watching the world go by outside the window. His placid expression gives away nothing of what he's thinking. But he still manages to look regally handsome. Izuku barely feels worthy of being in his presence. I didn't not want you to come with me, he says softly. I just wasn't expecting it. Ah, Todoroki says, turning to look at him. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Oh, no, I'm not, Izuku says. He's just flustered, but that's nothing new. Todoroki still looks unsure, so Izuku barrels ahead to a new topic. Congratulations again on being nominated. Todoroki shakes his head. I should be thanking you, he says. I meant what I said. I wouldn't be nominated if not for you. You don't know that. Izuku protests. You had some amazing saves the past year, like that flipped bus in April, or the baby in August. Todoroki's mouth twitches, and Izuku realizes he's revealing his hyperfocus a bit too obviously again. Sorry, there's a reason they announced my nomination now. And we both know it, Todoroki says, and even Izuku can admit that's true. What happened at the university has really caught everyone's attention. Todoroki clears his throat. Seriously though, I can't believe you remember which month those other things happened. I hadn't realized you were. I didn't know you were such a... Izuku stares at his knees, cheeks burning up. A fanboy. An expert, Todoroki amends politely. But now that I do, I can't help but feel I've made a terrible impression. Izuku whips his head around to stare at him. Todoroki is watching him very seriously, like he truly believes what he's just said. Never has anyone been so hopelessly wrong. And Izuku doesn't mean to say what he does next, but his thoughts are completely jumbled between don't effing let him think that and I'd never think something so stupid and what comes out is, don't be effing stupid. Todoroki's eyebrows lift in shock. Izuku claps his hands to his mouth with a strangled shriek. Am I? Todoroki says slowly, being effing stupid? That's not what I meant to say. Izuku wails, slumping forward until his forehead touches his knees. You haven't made a terrible impression at all. Unlike me. I don't know exactly what you meant to say, Todoroki says, but I think I got the gist. It seemed very emphatic, which is fortunate for me. It is, Izuku asks, still mortified. Well, given I wanted to arrange a tour of our hero agency for you, Todoroki says, yes. Izuku slowly raises his head to look at him again. Todoroki is watching him out of the corner of his eye, like he's afraid if he looks at Izuku full on, Izuku will fling himself out of the moving vehicle. Honestly, the assumption might not be that far off. Arrange a what? Izuku asks dumbly. I might have thought to ask sooner if I'd known about your expertise, Todoroki says, still judiciously refraining from calling Izuku a total nerd. But listening to you in the interview, hearing your interests, I thought that maybe that would be a good way of thanking you. But Izuku flounders to find the right words as he comprehends what Todoroki is saying. You already did. This interview was the thanks part. Subjecting you to being a talk show victim isn't exactly what I'd call a proper thank you, Todoroki says. That was just to get the press off your back. Maybe this is a bit egotistical of me to offer, I just thought. It's not. Izuku practically yells. No, this is very. He waves his hands by his face excitably and then laughs, too loud. Yes, please, absolutely. Todoroki blinks at his increase in volume level. So, you would like to visit. It would literally be the best thing that could ever happen to me, Izuku tells him. Oh, Todoroki says. Great, I'll set it up. Then he smirks, the tiniest bit. Also, second best. Izuku cocks his head. Huh, it would be the second best thing, Todoroki explains. The best would be seeing All Might's agency, right? Izuku puts his face in his hands again, peeking through his fingers so he can watch as Todoroki's smile widens to an outright sheet-eating grin. Todoroki-san, naturally. Every member of the Pro Hero Fan Association on campus has seen all the news coverage about what happened during the villain attack a couple weeks prior, so it's no surprise that everyone is aware of what took place involving Izuku that day. However, it seems nobody realized the full extent of what happened to him and Todoroki until after the talk show interview airs. "I can't believe you almost died," says one of his friends at their weekly circle meeting. Mayumi is a sweet first-year girl with an affinity for the history and fashion of hero costuming. "Senpai, that was so dangerous." Izuku scrubs a hand through his hair bashfully. "Yeah, I'm still sorta processing it myself." One of the older boys smacks him on the back and he stumbles. "It's been a month, Midoriya," he says. "Just accept it, you're a national treasure." "No, I'm sure everyone will forget pretty soon," Izuku says. The news cycle moves fast. He's flustered, very unused to receiving this amount of attention in meetings. Mostly he stays quiet. "When I saw your interview," says their president, and Izuku nervously stands at attention under her gaze. "I thought, he spent so much time studying them. Of course he wouldn't stop to consider he shouldn't do what he did." She gives him a tiny smile. "You're kinda dumb, but really brave, Midoriya-kun." The club president is a very pretty, popular senior who has never so much as spoken to Izuku before, and he can barely look her in the eye when he says, "Yes. Thank you." He's so desperate to be a hero, he'd kill himself trying. Izuku tries not to wince. This last is said by their vice president. She does speak to Izuku frequently, but it's not usually something he looks forward to. She is generally the reason he stays quiet in most meetings. "I was hoping not to die. Mostly," he says hesitantly. "I can't hear you when you mutter, Midoriya," she says with a sigh. "Anyway, it's a good thing you know so much about chemistry, since you couldn't have really done anything else." Her quirk is seeing slightly better in the dark than most people, which wouldn't have been any help in the situation, either. But she doesn't really hide the fact that she thinks it's lame that he's so obsessed with heroes without having a quirk of his own. Yeah, Izuku says, lacing his fingers together in his lap and staring down at them. He knows he might be pretty useless normally, but he was still able to save Todoroki and Hana. That feels like the most important part, so he tries not to forget it. He remembers what Todoroki said to him. "It was lucky you were there." Izuku smiles a little bit. "Just lucky, I guess." "I think it's really lucky you were able to meet Shouto," squeals Mayumi. "He's your favorite." "Were you dying?" "I kinda was," Izuku says. He's really amazing, in person." "Is he nice?" "Yeah, he is," Izuku confirms eagerly. "I was pretty freaked out about talking to him at first, but he's super nice." You must be so happy to be right about that," his kuhai says brightly. "And relieved," Izuku admits. "Is that why you said you think it's so obvious he's not cold?" the vice president asks. "Oh no." Izuku and the vice president don't exactly see eye to eye on Todoroki's hero persona. She's actually a fairly well-known artist among Shouto fans. But while her art itself is very nice, Izuku often feels she has a tendency to portray Shouto as overly well-mannered, standoffish, and indifferent. While a lot of people enjoy this part of Todoroki's appeal, and he can be that way at times, Izuku has always insisted that this misses the nuances of who he actually is as a person. Todoroki has shown plenty of times in the past that he can be very rude, but it often comes from a place of strong emotion. He's also funny and warm and kind. A lot of times, people forget all this when they only want to idolize his sexy ice prince persona, but it's just plain wrong. Of course, Izuku has never told her she's wrong to her face, but he has made his opinion on Todoroki clear on Twitter, and his thread about it had gained a surprising amount of retweets. Given their mutual contacts, she had seen it, and quote retweeted it with a caption that suggested she had been personally attacked. To all her followers, they had not been very nice about it. She had apologized during the next club meeting, saying she only wanted to have an open discussion, but regardless, Izuku's Twitter has been private for the better part of 2 years. This is fine by him. He never had any followers or anyone interested in him anyway. After the past few days, though, he's been getting a lot of follow requests that he has steadfastly pretended not to notice. "I just wanted to make sure he knew how much I appreciated him reaching out to me," Izuku explains, voice rising at the end into a nervous question. It's not, strictly speaking, a lie. He wasn't even thinking about her specifically when he said that. There was too much else going on. But yes, it does feel good to have first-hand evidence that he was right all along. "He seems to really like you," Mayumi says. "Like, a lot." She is peering at him with a very significant expression and he giggles nervously under her scrutiny. "Like I said, he's really nice." "I guess so, but those pictures are really something." She sing-songs. "Huh?" Izuku asks. "What pictures? What do you mean?" She gasps loudly. "You haven't seen them?" "He was there," the vice president says loudly. "But he was talking and stuff," Mayumi says, oblivious. "He might not realize." She whips out her phone and after a moment of searching for something, holds it out to him. "This thread, senpai, look." Baffled, Izuku takes her phone from her. It shows some Twitter thread from a popular pro-hero fan blogger that tends to be a little more on the ridiculous side, usually heavy on the memes. It's all a bunch of images from the interview, with the caption every single time at Todoroki Shouto looked at Midoriya Izuku like he was the best thing to exist during that interview. They tagged Todoroki in it. Izuku's stomach churns as he scrolls through screenshot after screenshot, all of which feature, as promised, any moment Todoroki was watching Izuku during the interview. Of course Todoroki was watching him. Izuku was telling the story and Todoroki was listening. He wants to point this out, but he keeps getting distracted the further he looks. He hadn't had the chance to look at Todoroki that much during the interview. He'd been too preoccupied with talking without stuttering or making a fool of himself, so he really hadn't noticed how intense, practically unwavering, Todoroki's gaze was. And it's not just that he's watching Izuku closely. He looks protective when Izuku gets flustered over being teased, amused when Izuku is describing his school and job, and in the parts where Izuku is talking about the attack, there's something alight in his eyes, something soft that makes Izuku's heart do an incredible series of flip-flops. It looks like fondness, pride, almost, but it's even warmer. Those are, Izuku says faintly, handing the phone back to his clubmate like it's a grenade about to go off. Those are lots of great Shouto pictures, yeah. She looks exasperated at him. You didn't even look at the best one. She tugs on his arm and he reluctantly leans over to look at her screen, his dread mounting higher. The last tweet in the thread is actually a moving GIF. Izuku doesn't remember which moment this was, but he seems to be explaining something in a particularly animated fashion. He pauses for a moment and runs a hand through his hair, a nervous tick as much as to get it out of his eyes. The GIF very rapidly zooms in on Todoroki, who has been watching Izuku intently the entire time, just in time to catch him lick his lips, tongue running over them to wet them. Oh, Izuku utters out loud, without quite meaning to say it. He wants to say it's just editing. He doesn't know why someone felt the need to make all of this, make nothing look like something that's awful, because what if Todoroki sees this and regrets everything? Their interactions, the interview, inviting Izuku to tour the agency. He seems very focused, Mayumi notes. People's lips get dry, Izuku replies defensively. Even Todoroki's, which are perfect in every way. Not that Izuku has been staring at them up close. Oh, no, he's not going to be able to stop thinking about Todoroki's lips now, is he? He sighs. At least there's probably no way he saw any of this. Todoroki has millions of followers, all tweeting at him, about him, every day. He retweeted the first one, the girl tells him, so he did. He what? Izuku says dully, as his heart pounds out what are undoubtedly its last few, ponderous beats. He what? The vice president snaps. Okay, the club president says, clearly sensing disaster, it's time to get started everyone. The vice president looks murderous. Izuku sits as far away from her as possible and tries not to make eye contact the entire rest of the meeting, or think about the fact that Todoroki retweeted a thread of himself staring at Izuku. Izuku has no idea how he's going to face him again at his agency on Friday. Todoroki does not retract his invitation, much to Izuku's everlasting surprise. So come Friday, he finds himself walking up to the posh, multi-story office building just outside the city center. It's a building he knows well, given its proximity to his school, which is not entirely a coincidence. His reasons aren't purely creepy, though. He chose to study so close because it's not unusual for the agency to pluck students fresh from his university, given their familiarity with it. Or maybe that's still creepy. He's not sure. He smooths down the front of his shirt, feeling nervous about his choice of attire. He actually asked Todoroki earlier in the week about what he should wear. It was an office building, so business wear. Business casual. He'd had no idea, so, still feeling amazed that he could just do it, he'd sent a text. Todoroki had called him back, instead. Just dress casually. Really? Izuku asked. Are you sure? It's my agency, Todoroki replied. How would I not be sure? It was a valid point. Maybe you're worried I have crappy business clothes, Izuku says. Todoroki had let out that low snort of laughter he sometimes did that always made Izuku grin, too. Are they maroon? He'd asked, and Izuku groaned. It's still so weird to talk to him on the phone. Izuku knows Todoroki can text just fine, but he seems to prefer talking directly, possibly because he always seems to be doing something that requires the use of both hands already, like paperwork, or driving, or exercising. This is bad for Izuku, who is extremely anxious about talking on the phone always, and still has a hard time dealing with hearing Todoroki's voice directly in his ear. The time Izuku had spoken to him about scheduling the interview had been in the middle of one of Todoroki's workouts and had almost resulted in Izuku's death, because he'd been so distracted that he'd ignored a traffic light and nearly walked into oncoming traffic. Izuku wound up having some thoughts later on that night. There were some scenarios he had imagined that he is not proud of, but it had been nearly impossible not to think about Todoroki's slightly breathless voice right in his ear. So, it's dangerous. But he also really likes talking to Todoroki, so the phone is just a necessary evil he has to make his peace with. Todoroki meets him out front, just outside the entrance of the building. Izuku is surprised. He hadn't actually expected to see that much of him today. It's still a weekday, and Todoroki must be extraordinarily busy. He's wearing his recognizable blue hero outfit. Maybe he hasn't yet left on patrol. "Hi," Izuku says, feeling suddenly out of breath, even though he took the train and the walk was short. "Sorry, were you waiting long?" "I just walked out," Todoroki tells him. "They told me when you arrived at the station." Izuku's information sensors all start pinging so hard he forgets to be shy about Todoroki coming out to welcome him personally. "Wow, what? You have it monitored? Is that part of your jurisdiction? Or do you share it with other agencies in the area? Is it for security purposes, for the city, or more like a private security type thing? Do you have a system set up at other stations? And how much coverage?" "I can't tell you the answer to most of these things, because you don't have proper security clearance," Todoroki says, and Izuku deflates. "Oh," he says, "right. But if you want to come inside," Todoroki continues, "I can have you sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then I can answer some of it." Izuku perks up. "You can." He can feel himself literally shaking in excitement. This means he isn't just getting a tour, he's getting insider info. The stuff the pros know. Or, at least, some of the stuff. Todoroki inclines his head in the direction of the main entrance. "After you." Izuku scurries towards the doors, and Todoroki squints at the writing on his plain white t-shirt as he goes by. "Dress, shirt." "Oh, yeah," Izuku says, looking down at his chest. "Because you told me to be casual, but I thought this way my intent would still show." Todoroki just looks at him for a moment, before shaking his head. "You're strange." Izuku beams at him. "Yeah, I get told that a lot." It's true that Izuku may be biased, but within about 5 seconds of entering the building, he's decided Todoroki's agency is the most amazing building he's ever been inside in his whole life. Wow, he breathes, standing in place and turning in circles to take in the entire glassy atrium. It has no ceiling, soaring up through all the floors with the sky open above them. That has a cover that extends to create a roof, Todoroki says, in case of bad weather. Izuku has seen some images of the inside of Todoroki's agency, but as it's basically a privately owned government office, civilians and press aren't often allowed inside, and neither is picture taking. This is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for someone like Izuku. "Did you design this office, Todoroki-san?" Izuku asks, as he signs in with the receptionist at Todoroki's request. "No, that was Eiko," Todoroki says, just as a set of elevator doors dings softly behind them and the manager herself emerges, trusty clipboard in hand. Izuku is actually relieved to see her this time. Besides Todoroki and Eiko, he doesn't know anyone else at the agency, so if Eiko will be giving him the tour he won't feel as awkward. She's surprisingly nice. "Sign this, and you're all set," she says, holding out the clipboard with the company NDA. Once Izuku signs, she takes it and smiles. "Welcome to the Shouto Hero Agency." Izuku presses his lips tightly together and lets out a noise like a kettle boiling, before he starts bowing to them both repeatedly. "Thank you so much, it's such an honor, I really can't say it enough." "We're glad to have you," Eiko says. Shouto was very keen on it. Todoroki's expression doesn't change, so Izuku is left to flounder until she says, "Let's go up, unless you're still enjoying the atrium." "Oh, I am, but let's go." They talk on the elevator ride up, and Izuku learns that Eiko graduated Yui a year before Todoroki in the business course. Her business savvy is all hard-earned. Since her quirk is entirely unrelated, she can turn liquids into any kind of shape she chooses. "It makes us a hit at parties, though," Todoroki says blandly, which makes the other two laugh. They stop on the main work floor, where most of the offices are. The workspace is very inviting and open, the desks not closed in by walls. The windows are big and let in lots of light. And there's lots of seating areas for people to gather. It looks like a really nice place to work. "I'll leave you to it," Eiko says, turning to go. "Oh, you're not giving me the tour?" Izuku asks, surprised. "No, I am," Todoroki says. "Unless you prefer Eiko." "I thought you'd be too busy," Izuku practically yells, before covering his mouth. Todoroki is staring at him with slight uncertainty, and he wants to kick himself over somehow managing to make Todoroki think he would rather not spend as much time together as they possibly can. "No, Todoroki-san, I would, that would be amazing, but don't you have to work?" "I don't want to impose. Fridays are usually mostly for paperwork," Todoroki says, his face pulling into an expression that suggests he is not a fan of this in the slightest. "But I don't have much to do today." Because he's been staying late at the office the entire past week, trying to finish it all, Eiko mentions breezily. "Eiko, why you shouldn't have done that." Izuku gasps. "Oh, no, now he really feels like he's imposing." "He wanted to," Eiko says, before Todoroki can get a word in. "After all these years, I can tell when he's looking forward to something." She bows neatly to the two of them, before setting off. "She knows you really well, doesn't she?" Izuku asks, somewhat in awe. "Eiko-san is very cool." Unfortunately, Todoroki sighs, but he sounds fond. Where would you like to start? You're letting me choose. Rather unsurprisingly, the rest of the agency is just as impressive as its atrium. Izuku decides to beeline for the surveillance room, which Todoroki says is fine now that he's under contractual obligation not to spill all their company's secrets. Not that he ever would, but it's good to know they're careful. The control room is mind-blowingly high-tech, and all the people that work there have quirks that help augment their eyesight or awareness in some way. The setup is baffling to Izuku, even when Todoroki and the security team explain it to him, but he's thrilled just to see it all. They make their way through different wings of the facilities, through the state-of-the-art gym and rec room that all employees have access to, before visiting the practice gym reserved only for heroes and sidekicks. This is, of course, where they spend the rest of the morning. There are a lot of people training, but they stop when Todoroki comes in with Izuku to say hello. Izuku recognizes them all and is fairly unable to stop his excitement meltdown at meeting them all at the same time. Ooh, is the little guy gonna be okay? Precision Ox whispers to Todoroki, his bull nostrils flaring with concern as Izuku blushes and sweats and hyperventilates his way through regurgitating Ox's entire heroic history up to that point without taking a breath. Todoroki pats Izuku on the back calmingly. Yeah, he does this, just give him a minute. It would be impossible to get all of the nervous excitement out of his system, but they all recognize him from the interview already and he does manage to hold a proper conversation with them. After that, they go back to training, and he and Todoroki stay to watch. Todoroki seems to want to hear what Izuku thinks about their sparring, the strategies and usage of their respective quirks. Even though this is a bit nerve-wracking, it's also an immensely interesting challenge, and Izuku does his best to give his own input, ask questions, provide some of the insight he's gained from years of cramped writing collected in countless notebooks. Todoroki listens without seeming to grow tired of it. Next is lunch at the sprawling cafeteria. All the food looks incredible, and Izuku has to try the katsudon, of course, but then the American cuisine section smells so amazing as he walks by that he also winds up with a huge cheeseburger in honor of All Might. Belatedly, he realizes it would be a travesty not to eat Todoroki's trademark favorite food with the man himself, so he gets a whole bowl of cold soba, which they both slurp together contentedly. Even Todoroki's noodle slurping technique is impressive. After eating it all, Izuku is unable to move for several minutes, while Todoroki patiently waits for him to recover. After lunch, they visit the research and development labs, and end up spending nearly the whole afternoon there. Todoroki's agency is well funded enough to have its own team of support engineers that develop most of the items and costume improvements in-house. Their work is fascinating to Izuku. Some of it he's studied and researched himself, but the cutting-edge stuff is all new and exciting. Todoroki doesn't try to hurry him along, instead introducing him to the team. They're all too happy to answer Izuku's questions, and he's brimming with them. I don't want to bother you, he keeps saying, until the head of R&D finally tells him he doesn't have to worry about it. You saved our boss's life, remember? She asks. This finally and effectively stops Izuku's constant fretting. The sky outside the windows begins to turn from blue to pink and orange. It'll be time for Izuku to head back soon, so they stop on a quiet upper floor to say goodbye to Eiko. Walking through the hallways, they pass by a big corner office, and Izuku spots a name on the door, Todoroki Shouto. He thinks he's being very sneaky and walking slower and trying to peek inside. But apparently not, because Todoroki says from behind him, you can go in if you want. Izuku jumps, caught. You don't mind. Todoroki shrugs, shaking his head. The office on the inside is very nice, but it's not as intimidating as Izuku would expect from a typical pro-hero executive office. There are awards on the wall, and a small but neatly kept trophy case, which gives the illusion that these are stored here more as mementos than due to pride. Many of them are from Todoroki's time at Yui, some of them from his earliest years there, and a couple of them, award for Best Air Conditioning Unit. Izuku reads off one of the most ostentatious-looking awards. My finest achievement, Todoroki says, voice incredibly serious, specifically given to me by two illustrious heroes. I'm sure you know of them, Chargebolt and Cellophane. Momo, Creati made the trophy. That was back in our second year. Oh my gosh, Izuku whispers, gazing at the award with newfound awe. There's a lot of stories about the students from Todoroki's year, All Might students. Izuku has devoured them all, but hearing new and silly anecdotes from Todoroki himself is a whole new level of amazing. Todoroki has picture frames on his desk of his friends, his siblings, his mother. There is only one photo of his father, Enji, taken in the past few years, judging by the wicked-looking scar down the left side of the man's face. The relationship between father and son has always seemed strained, clearly evidenced by the Shouto Hero Agency standing separate to Endeavor's sprawling complex. There's not much public info known about why the two are so at odds with each other, and Izuku has never been interested in prying that deep. That particular facet of Todoroki's life is too private, too personal. A tinny beeping noise makes him look up from his snooping to where Todoroki is standing, leaning against the doorframe. Todoroki puts a hand to his ear. Eiko, what's? He pauses as he listens, his expression going from confused to alarmed. Todoroki-san. Izuku asks. Sorry, Todoroki says, we have to go, not here, somewhere else. What? What's wrong? My old man's here, Todoroki says. He sounds more annoyed than anything else. Of course he'd turn up today. Oh, Izuku says. Well, I can wait, while you. No, I don't particularly want to talk to him right now, Todoroki says. And I'm sure he won't see eye to eye with my taking a day off. He'll come to my office to look for me, so we have to move. They hurry out into the corridor, Izuku following behind Todoroki as they head for the elevators. They've nearly reached them when Todoroki stops dead and hisses, he's where? To Eiko, presumably, before grabbing Izuku's arm and dragging him through the first random door nearest them. Izuku yelps. The room they've ducked into isn't a room, it's a tiny storage closet, with a couple of shelves digging into Izuku's back. It's barely big enough to fit the assortment of mops and brooms inside it. And it is definitely not big enough to fit two whole people, especially not ones as tall and broad as Todoroki. It's a small blessing that Izuku is as small as the hero is large. All this happens in seconds, and on the other side of the door, Izuku hears the elevators ding as they open. Next he hears footfalls, solid, heavy ones. If footsteps could be described as intimidating, then that's what he'd call these. He realizes right away who they must belong to, and why they have found themselves here, hiding among the cleaning supplies. Endeavor, he hears Eiko call. It sounds like she's down the hall. What a pleasure to see you. Eiko, comes the greeting. And Guo, Izuku thinks, his voice is even deeper in person somehow. Is Shouto in his office? He's not, I'm afraid. A strange shudder goes through Todoroki, and he puffs a soft breath through his nose, and Izuku realizes in shock that Todoroki is trying not to laugh. He can't see him very well in the dark, but Izuku stares up at him, incredulous and a bit delighted. Todoroki is a little sheet. Outside, Eiko continues to painstakingly deter Endeavor from seeking out his son. She probably doesn't realize where they are either, and it's this admittedly hilarious detail that makes Izuku suddenly overly aware of the situation. He's in a tiny closet, with Todoroki Shouto standing so close to him that he can feel each little tremor of laughter that shivers through the other men. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Todoroki lets out another quiet huff of air, and it happens. Izuku remembers the gif. Todoroki's captivating eyes, staring so intensely, and then the lip licking. Suddenly, he can't stop thinking about it. Todoroki watching him, Todoroki's lips so close to his ear, like they're talking on the phone except right now there's no phone. Todoroki is right there and so are his lips and they're probably warm and soft. Todoroki has grabbed onto Izuku's arms to steady him. His hands are so big his fingers can almost touch, encircling Izuku's biceps. So big. Todoroki is really so large in person. The shelves at Izuku's back force him directly into Todoroki's front, and there was little time to arrange himself better before Endeavor appeared. Right now, he's bordering on dangerously gropey, pressed up against Todoroki with his hands resting on the older man's broad chest. It is. Izuku really can't help but notice, exactly as firm as it looks when he's just staring at it from afar. Either in real life or in those somewhat risque photo shoots Todoroki very occasionally agrees to, the ones that manage to get him almost or entirely shirtless. Izuku notices distantly that he does run hotter on his left side, the realization a dim roaring in his head, buried beneath the mass of his stupid lizard brain. It's making things below the belt distinctly uncomfortable. Eiko is saying something that Izuku doesn't catch, and Todoroki shifts a bit, angling his body so he can turn his head to press one ear up against the door. The movement makes him shift, his leg juts out a bit more, and his thigh slots between Izuku's, and Izuku's soul abandons his earthly body. Oh dear, Todoroki is tall, and his legs are much longer than Izuku's, and Izuku has nowhere to go, so he falls forward slightly. The inner seam of his shorts pushes firmly against the sturdy bulk of Todoroki's thigh, and he gasps at the pressure. Awful timing, terrible timing, the worst effing possible timing. Right now, trapped in a closet with Todoroki, with his crotch pressed against Todoroki's thigh, is the most mortifying moment possible for him to pop a boner. If he had any hope of his dignity being spared, of Todoroki not noticing, it is quickly dashed when Todoroki goes absolutely still against him. Izuku couldn't say anything even if there was something to say, because of the danger that Endeavor will overhear. Softly, with no other course of action open to him, he drops his face into Todoroki's chest in shame. This is a mistake, too, because with his nose stuffed in Todoroki's shirt, he gets the faintest hint of musky sweat and the scent of some light, intoxicating cologne, barely applied but enough to make Izuku's head swim with something that feels like hunger, even after the buffet they'd eaten earlier. He closes his eyes and murmurs as many silent apologies as he can until he hears Eiko say, "Of course, right this way," followed by the clicking of her heels and Endeavor's loud boot falls fading away down the hallway. Once they're no longer audible, Todoroki murmurs, "Quick." Izuku hears him fumble for the handle and the door flies open, nearly blinding him with the bright lights outside. Again, Izuku finds himself being towed along as Todoroki's hand closes around his wrist, and they run, making a beeline for the elevators. Todoroki jams the button with his finger frantically until the doors finally open and they tumble inside. To Izuku's bewilderment, he hits the button for the top floor. He might leave, which means we can't go down to the atrium, Todoroki explains. But he won't come up. Izuku nods dumbly. Todoroki is still gripping his wrist. But no sooner does he think about this than Todoroki lets go of him jerkily. They're still standing awkwardly close together, silent, in the elevator. Izuku stares at the floor. "I'm Todoroki-san, I." He doesn't get any further before Todoroki interrupts. "That wasn't very professional of me," he says. "I should have just dealt with it not like a child." "I understand." Izuku swallows painfully. "You didn't want your dad to know I was wandering around here, right?" "It's not that," Todoroki says. "I didn't want him to ruin today. That's all." The doors open, and they find themselves at the top of the building. The elevator goes all the way up to the roof. There's a helipad, and a pavilion that looks like it might be used for social gatherings. The view of the city from the rooftop is stunning, especially bathed in the pastel colors of golden hour, right before the sun sets. Izuku would be awestruck if he didn't feel so horrible. Todoroki must regret everything, now, for sure this time. Izuku has never felt so low. His dream for so long has just been to meet Todoroki, to talk to him, to somehow let him know the impact he's had on Izuku's life, how much he means to him. But God, not like that. Endeavor hadn't ruined things. But Izuku definitely had. And as much as he wants to slink away and never face Todoroki again, he has to apologize. "I'm so sorry," he blurts out, without explanation. There's no justification he can give. He just bows as low as he can manage. Maybe he should get on his hands and knees for what happened back there. "It's fine," Todoroki says. "That was my fault. After everything you've done, I'm not mad. I'll leave now. I'll leave and I promise you never have to see me or talk to me again. But I'm really so sorry." "You can't promise that," Todoroki says, raising his voice to be heard over Izuku's panicked stream of consciousness. "Because I wanted to ask you if you'd like to go to the Heroes' Gala next month." Izuku falls silent. Slowly, he straightens out of his bow to look at Todoroki to see if he's joking. Or maybe Izuku completely misheard him. That must be it. "To what?" "The Heroes' Gala," Todoroki says. "So, no," Izuku didn't mishear him. "The Heroes' Gala," he repeats faintly. "The annual Japan Heroes' Gala." Todoroki nods. "Yes." Izuku stares at him. Not only is the Heroes' Gala one of the biggest events of the year in Japan, but it's also, obviously, one of the most exclusive. It's part award ceremony, part entertainment show, an event that only the cream of the crop pro heroes are invited to attend. Izuku's mouth feels dry. "How would I go to that?" "With me," Todoroki says, head tilted like a confused puppy. He looks so cute when he does that, Izuku can't help but notice. "I'm allowed a guest." It takes another moment for Izuku to process this. "Wait," he says, then practically shrieks, "What?" Todoroki's eyes slide away from him. He almost looks nervous, which in itself seems ludicrous. "I should have asked sooner. I know it's a bit last minute now, so I understand if you can't." "I don't have anything to wear," Izuku croaks. There's roughly 700 other things he should say instead of this, but none of them come to mind in that instant. All he can think is that he doesn't have a suit nearly nice enough to wear to be allowed into the Heroes' Gala. Maroon won't cut it, which is terrible, because he's never wanted to say yes to something so badly in his life. Todoroki looks at him again. "If I help with that," he says slowly, "you'll go." Izuku nods, and Todoroki does that thing where he doesn't smile with his mouth or even really with his eyes, but Izuku can tell he is smiling, somehow. That's just what it looks like on him sometimes, and it's no less happy. He still doesn't understand, though, so he asks, "Why are you inviting me?" The multicolored sky is Todoroki's backdrop, standing on the rooftop so far up, and the breeze blows and lifts his hair like some scene straight out of an anime. "Because it's for heroes," he says, "so I thought you should be there." He then has to try to awkwardly comfort Izuku as Izuku bawls his eyes out for several minutes straight. But Todoroki reassures him, as they stand together on the rooftop looking out over the city until the sun drops below the horizon line, that he doesn't mind in the slightest. Talking to Todoroki becomes, weirdly enough, far easier than it had been before the closet incident. Izuku still can't really bring himself to think too hard about what had transpired. But the fact of the matter is that it had been, bar none, the most embarrassing thing he's ever done. And Todoroki hadn't pushed him away, not literally, and not figuratively either. Instead, Todoroki had invited him to the Heroes' Gala, of all things. He could have. He could have not done that. Izuku doesn't know if Todoroki still felt a lingering obligation because Izuku had saved his life. But he didn't have to do something like this. So Izuku is forced to fully grasp, finally, that maybe Todoroki isn't going to get annoyed by being around him. Izuku is somewhat used to bothering people eventually, with his nervous habits and awkwardness. Who would have thought that one of the people he didn't bother would be pro-hero Shouto? The realization makes him feel lighter than air, and makes phone calls with Todoroki much less terrifying. Izuku's face still gets hot, and the butterflies in his stomach never really go away, but he stops worrying that every little thing he says is going to make Todoroki hang up, never to call him again. One quiet evening, Izuku's phone buzzes with a message from him as he's studying for an exam. He snatches it up immediately. Todoroki, do you have a minute? I wanted to talk about plans for the gala. Izuku. Yes, I'm here. All Might's voice announces he has a call a moment later, only managing to blare out, a foe, before Izuku answers. Hi, he says. Hey, Todoroki replies. This isn't a bad time, is it? No, Izuku tells him. I was just studying. This can wait until tomorrow, if it's fine, really. Izuku insists hurriedly. It's nice to hear, good to talk to you. Oh, Todoroki says. You, too. It hasn't been that long since Izuku visited his hero agency, but Todoroki's words bring a silly smile to his face. Thanks, he says, and then winces. I mean, for thinking it's good to talk to me. Or wanting to talk to me. Thank you for calling. I haven't even said what I called to tell you yet, Todoroki says. Right, the gala, Izuku asks. He's an idiot. But as he keeps trying to remind himself during moments of crippling awkwardness, it hasn't stopped him from being invited to go to a gala with Todoroki. Not like with Todoroki. That makes it sound too much like he's just going as Todoroki's friend. His guest. He is Todoroki's friend guest. Yes, Todoroki says. I'm sure you know most of the details. But since it's out of town this year, we'll travel and stay overnight. I'll cover all those expenses, obviously, so you don't need to worry. Why you will. Izuku squeaks. He did know the gala wasn't being held in Tokyo, but he's been too excited to stop and think about how he would pay for things, or who would pay for things on his behalf. Of course, Todoroki says. The travel part is easy, we'll take my plane. Izuku has to bite his fist to keep from screeching. He's going to get to fly on Todoroki's private jet. He might not make it through takeoff. Okay, he manages to wheeze, finally. Good, Todoroki says. Now, the main thing I called to discuss. Attire. Izuku laughs nervously. Yes, do you have anything in mind? Any preference? Todoroki asks. The cut of the suit, the color. None, Izuku says, heading him off at the pass. Todoroki-san, you've seen my clothes. I have, Todoroki says, and I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. This makes Izuku grin. You don't have to be polite, he says. Just put me in something that's not going to embarrass you. You are going to be winning an award, after all. Todoroki huffs. Not this again. Izuku rolls his eyes. They've been going back and forth over this for the past few days, with him insisting and Todoroki refusing to listen. Todoroki keeps saying that there are more qualified gala nominees, and that there's no way for Izuku to know. But Izuku does know. He believes Todoroki will win, without a doubt. He always believes in Todoroki. If Todoroki wants to be obstinate, then Izuku will have to be, too. I'm positive, Izuku says. You really seem to be. Todoroki sighs, humoring him. He pauses, inhales. But you wouldn't, you know. Wouldn't what? Embarrass me, Todoroki tells him. You could wear the maroon one, honestly. I can't, Izuku says, horrified at the thought. That's not why I'm offering to help you find something to wear, Todoroki continues. I just want you to be. I don't want you to think I'm embarrassed by you. I'm not. Okay, Izuku says. He currently feels embarrassed of himself. I never have been, Todoroki continues. Not when you saved me, not in the interview, not on the tour. He stops speaking abruptly. Izuku can feel himself withering away. Okay, he says again, much more shrilly. It is a relief to be told outright that Todoroki isn't rethinking everything, but he is not ready to discuss the closet incident yet, or ever. Todoroki clears his throat. I can arrange to have you fitted for a suit. Oh, Izuku says. Wow, that's fancy. It's a fancy party, Todoroki says. Could you make time in the afternoon next week? Izuku can, and so Todoroki tells him he'll book a time with his tailor. All the logistics sorted out. Izuku thanks Todoroki one final time, and then hovers nervously, not quite wanting to say goodbye yet. I'll talk to you later, then. Soon, Todoroki says. It reassures Izuku, somehow. Good night, Todoroki-san. Good night, Todoroki says. But before Izuku can quite hang up, he suddenly adds, I meant to ask, how was your day? Oh, Izuku says, surprised. It was good. He starts to tell Todoroki about a lab project he worked on that day, and then about his most recent club meeting. Todoroki doesn't stop him, And before Izuku realizes it, it's been at least another hour, and he really does have to force himself to hang up because Todoroki has an early morning patrol, and Izuku has to finish study. The following week, Wednesday, arrives quickly. It's the day they've settled on for the suit fitting. After Izuku finishes with club activities for the day, someone will be coming to pick him up to take him to the tailor. But another member's presentation runs a bit long and the whole meeting ends up stretching on past their usual time to let out. Izuku waits anxiously, not wanting to be rude, but as soon as they wrap up he jumps out of his seat and starts packing up his things, sending off a hurried text message to Shouto. Izuku, could you let the driver know I'm on my way? So sorry to keep him waiting. We finished late. Like clockwork, his phone starts ringing, panicking slightly. He fumbles to pick it up. I'm headed out right now. No rush, Todoroki says calmly. You said room 302 in the humanities building, right? Yes, Izuku huffs, trying to juggle his phone, books, club materials, and the bag he's trying to stuff everything in as he heads for the door. Sorry, Todoroki-san. Todoroki, someone asks from behind him. Izuku spins around, phone still clutched to his face, to see the whole of his club staring at him, trapped while he struggles ineffectively with the door to the classroom. There's no way they could have failed to hear his brief conversation. Immediately, he starts to sweat. The first thing Todoroki had asked when he gave Izuku his number was if he could trust him, and Izuku just let it slip. He has it to about 24 random people. You have Shouto's number, one of the first years asks. Mayumi muffles an excited shriek behind her hands. Izuku says, as a bead of anxious perspiration trickles down the side of his face. That's, well, you see. Come on. The vice president pushes past the others as Izuku continues to blink at them all in terror. She surveys him very coldly. Midoriya-kun, this is getting so awkward. I know that you think you're his biggest fan and all, but you can't just make stuff up. Izuku gapes at her. She thinks he was faking the phone call. Actually, he can use this to his advantage. He has to admit that he, too, would assume he was faking the phone call if he wasn't himself. Eyes averted, he gropes for the door handle behind him, laughing awkwardly as he tries to escape. God, yeah, you're right. Haha. He has got to get out of here. He can never show his face at a club meeting again. I guess. There's no way he'd ever give me his number. Someone pulls the door open abruptly and he yelps. I did give you my number, though, a familiar voice says blankly, and Izuku realizes he never hung up the call, and that Todoroki is, in fact, now standing in the doorway right behind him. Oh, Izuku says faintly. Hello. He ends the call. Slowly, cheeks burning, he turns to face Todoroki. He can barely bring himself to do it, but he looks up, all the way up, until he meets Todoroki's eyes. This is vastly unfair. Izuku hadn't even realized Todoroki was going to come fetch him personally. And is he trying to kill Izuku by looking so good doing it? He's dressed more casually than Izuku has ever seen him, outside of creepy tabloid shots of him going about his day off duty. The gray Henley he's wearing seems like it can barely contain him, stretched tight across his chest, biceps straining against the thin fabric of the long sleeves, pushed up to his elbows. Todoroki looks good in jeans. Izuku muses, from somewhere far outside his head, he feels like he's having an out-of-body experience. The rough, laid-back look of his clothes is offset by the dark beanie and big sunglasses he's wearing, which gives him a soft and vaguely hilarious incognito look. Up close, though, it's still recognizably him, especially when he talks. Ready, is all Todoroki says. He's staring down at Izuku with a carefully blank expression that Izuku is too shell-shocked to try and puzzle out. Yes, Izuku says demurely. Todoroki looks at the rest of the club, who are all still frozen in shock, and nods. Izuku swallows, wondering what he'll say. Maybe he'll tell them all not to bother trying to get his contact info from Izuku, because he's going to make Izuku delete it. Maybe Todoroki is already planning on changing his number. I don't know if he's my biggest fan, Todoroki says, shrugging. He's a good friend, though. Sorry for interrupting. He waves in farewell and starts walking away. Izuku forgets to follow, momentarily just as stunned as everyone else. The vice president's mouth is hanging open. She covers it with her hand. Izuku isn't sure if she has anything else to say or not, but he quickly bows before she can get the chance and scurries after Todoroki. They don't talk until they're in the car. It's far too quiet inside the vehicle, and Todoroki doesn't seem like he's going to venture any comments. Izuku folds his hands in his lap. I didn't mean for them to find out, he blurts out, when the silence goes on too long. I should have been more careful. I didn't intend for you to keep it entirely clandestine, Todoroki says. I just didn't want you giving it out or pasting my number on chat forums. I wouldn't. Izuku gasps. I know, Todoroki says. His lips twitch. That's why I gave it to you in the first place. Izuku tries to smile, but it comes out wobbly. So you heard everything. I got the gist of it, Todoroki admits. Does that happen often? Izuku hesitates. Not all the time, but sometimes. She's that fan artist, Todoroki says. She comes to events a lot. I recognize her. Yeah, she seems like in a hole. Not expecting this, Izuku wheezes out a laugh. Todoroki-san. She's forcefully an ass, Todoroki mutters, which makes Izuku giggle harder. We just started off on kind of the wrong foot, he says, briefly. And with as little detail as possible, he explains their falling out to Todoroki. Todoroki's eyebrows rise to his hairline. And Izuku's explanation gets more nervous and scattered as the temperature in the car drops and an almost imperceptibly thin layer of frost creeps over the right side of Todoroki's face. I think I should have a discussion with her, he says stiffly, once Izuku is done. No, Izuku moans. That might be worse. Besides, it doesn't bother me that much. I'm just relieved you're not upset. Todoroki sighs. All right, I guess I'm relieved, too. You are? Izuku asks. What is there for Todoroki to be relieved about? Yes, Todoroki says. I thought I'd made things awkward by trying to follow you on Twitter. Izuku smiles serenely at him, uncomprehending. What? I worried maybe you didn't want me to follow you, since you never accepted my request, Todoroki explains. But you said you turned off notifications, right? Izuku's expression turns to stone, smile freezing on his face. Like his life flashing before his eyes, his Twitter feed scrolls past in his mind. His intensely geeky, hero analysis heavy, Shouto obsessed feed. The last thing he retweeted was a photo set of Todoroki's back muscles. He screeches, Noyal can Fulom, I'm sorry. Benign shock filters across Todoroki's beautiful face. Though, not because. It's not anything you've done. It's really not you, it's me. Izuku says desperately. Todoroki rubs his chin contemplatively. Not something I was expecting to hear at this stage. Izuku expires. He slumps against the window of the car in boneless despair. Todoroki-san, I'm trying to protect you. This makes Todoroki laugh, that soft laugh of his. I see. Izuku cracks one eye open to peer at him. Todoroki really looks so good in his soft, comfy clothes, almost smile creeping onto his features. Afternoon sunlight shining through the car window behind him. Izuku has always assumed that cameras couldn't really do Todoroki justice. And now he sees it's true. Todoroki always looks very handsome, but Izuku doesn't know that he's ever seen him truly relaxed. It doesn't surprise him, somehow, that Todoroki manages to be so much more good-looking in close proximity than in photos. What is surprising, but no less wonderful, is how funny he is in real life. You like messing with people, Izuku accuses, but nobody realizes it, so you always get away with it. Todoroki looks very deliberately out the window. But you see right through me, apparently. Izuku opens both eyes. I don't think I want to see through you. I just like seeing you for who you really are. Todoroki's expression softens for one brief moment, before Izuku adds, which is sometimes a jerk. Todoroki stretches out one long leg and lightly kicks Izuku, who grins and kicks him lightly back. And then the driver announces that they've arrived and it's time to get out. The tailor is located in a quiet upscale part of Tokyo that Izuku hasn't had cause to venture to before. The driver drops them right outside the shop, where tastefully arranged mannequins behind the glass windows display a variety of finely cut suits and other menswear. A doorman opens the entrance to admit them, and Izuku finds himself immediately surrounded by people offering to take his hoodie, store his backpack, asking if he would like anything to drink, providing slippers when he steps out of his shoes. It's like entering a fancy hotel as opposed to a clothing store. Well, Izuku whispers, as they are led to a private room where the fitting will take place. A short, elderly man is waiting to greet them, bowing deeply when they enter. Todoroki-sama, so good to see you, he says warmly. Are you keeping well? I am. Thank you, Chinoda-san, Todoroki says, returning the bow. Izuku bows as well, feeling jittery. This must be Midoriya-sama, Chinoda says. Izuku whips his head up. He's never been addressed so formally or politely before. I'm him, yes. Excellent, excellent. Stand up straight. Let's get a good look at you. Shinoda prods Izuku out of his characteristic slouching, straightening his shoulders, has him turn all the way around. Izuku thinks he sees the man's eyes flash purple. And then Shinoda is motioning for an assistant and giving them all Izuku's measurements, as the woman quickly jots them down. He can measure anything just by looking at it. Todoroki informs Izuku upon seeing his quizzical look. Izuku's eyes widen. Anything. Does it have a limit? Can you measure liquids as well as solids? Volume, I mean. What about? Incredible, Shinoda says. He glances at Todoroki. As sharp as you described him. I can see why you took such a liking to him. Todoroki nods. And Izuku blushes furiously. Quirks are very interesting to me, he says lamely, as if it's not obvious. I see that, Shinoda says. Suits are very interesting to me. So I'm very glad Todoroki-sama brought such a bright young man to my shop, so I can ensure you stand out as much as you deserve. Oh gosh, Izuku says, feeling very bowled over by all this. The lavish treatment, the praise, and apparently Todoroki telling people things about him, good things. He's got to be careful not to let it go to his head, he thinks resolutely. Let's try you in a couple of our exclusive pieces, Shinoda tells him, as assistants start to bring out suit after crisp, well-pressed suit. They get started dressing Izuku right away. He tries out standard black, charcoal, powder blue, even a dark green, but Todoroki and Shinoda both survey him in each before shaking their heads and moving on to the next. Finally, however, he comes out in a light gray tuxedo, and both their eyebrows lift. This, Todoroki says. It has to be this, Shinoda agrees, but it will need to be altered. He beckons to a different assistant, whose quirk seems to be similar to Best Jeanist's. She can manipulate fabric, shrinking or stretching it at will. As she starts on the alterations, Shinoda turns his attention to Todoroki. Have you given yours much thought? He asks. Todoroki shakes his head. I hadn't. I was thinking maybe a navy. Izuku makes a guttural noise in his throat that he doesn't quite manage to conceal fast enough. He purses his lips together immediately, avoiding looking in their direction. Midoriya, Todoroki asks. Nothing. I feel like that was definitely something, Todoroki says. What's wrong? Really, nothing, Izuku tries to insist. It's just, well, navy. Maybe, Todoroki says. Why? Izuku really wishes he could learn to keep his mouth shut. He can't, though, so he steamrolls ahead. First he tries to set the stage. Well, not that long ago, one of the people in my club did a presentation on you. She's a really big fashion buff, so a lot of it was on costume history, but she talked about the warring hairstyles era, too. The time when you were just starting out as a pro. Todoroki blinks. Is that what people call it? That is what people call it. Yes, Izuku tells him, as Shinoda nods knowingly. Todoroki sighs, looking resigned. I refuse to believe that there's anything worthwhile to discuss about the hairstyle choices I made when I was 19. Well, probably not to you, but people get in really heated discussions over it anyway, Izuku says. It's sort of all in fun, but also sort of serious. People argue a lot about what was best, though I think the current favorite is still when you grew it out super long. Really, Todoroki says. His exasperation transitions to surprise. I only did that to piss off my dad. I knew it, Izuku says, snapping his fingers. You knew? Todoroki asks. How? The amount of press photo ops of the two of you together is practically non-existent from your Shoujo Prince face. My what? Fan nickname, Izuku says, waving his hand. I always thought it was strange at the time, given you were still at his agency. You noticed that, Todoroki says. Izuku can't tell if he's impressed or despairing. Izuku has realized by now, though, that his insane amount of recall tends to just amuse Todoroki, so he doesn't try to deny it. He told me when I graduated that my hair was getting too long and that it made me look like an anime character. I thought I could do even better. Shinoda chuckles as Izuku smiles. He remembers the long hair days pretty fondly. Everyone lost their minds over every new picture, and whenever Todoroki had pulled it into a bun or a braid, it had been an event on a practically national scale. There are so many accounts dedicated to images of the nape of Todoroki's neck. You did look very elegant, he says. Anyway, the point is, a lot of people also have strong opinions about what kind of clothes you looked best in, pretty much based on what you were doing with your hair at the time. How do people have time to make these judgments? Todoroki asks. Don't they have jobs, school, lives? Clothing coordination is our life. For some, Shinoda says sagely, causing Todoroki to put his hands together in apology. For your long hair, everyone liked the white suit best, Izuku explains. The one you wore on the red carpet to the premiere of Twinkling's first movie. Todoroki says. He requested I wear that. It matched your look really well, though. Izuku says. Was that your favorite hairstyle, too? Todoroki asks him. The question catches him off guard. Mine. MHM. Izuku considers. I think my favorite was probably Punk Prince. Please tell me you don't mean the mohawk, Izuku says, grinning broadly as Todoroki shakes his head. That was a joke, he says, real regret creeping into his voice as Izuku laughs. I only did that because I heard Bakugo wanted to get one, and so I did it first. Izuku wheezes with laughter. What? Why? To spite him, obviously. He was furious. Oh my gosh, Izuku says, as realization dawns. That's why he blew up in that interview where they asked him what he thought of your hair. I didn't plan that, Todoroki says, but he still thinks I did, to this day. Izuku isn't sure whether or not Todoroki completely believes him about the mohawk, but he doesn't push him further. Truthfully, Izuku had always liked any of the styles he'd tried out, no matter what they were. The rotating hairstyles had always seemed to him kind of silly. A more playful side of himself Todoroki didn't show very often, but that clearly existed nonetheless. But if he's being honest, Izuku would have to say that his current style, a bit too short for bangs, but easy to push back or to the side, always a bit windswept, might be his favorite. Maybe it's because it makes Todoroki look a little more mature. Or maybe it's just because Izuku is getting to know him so well now, while he has it styled that way. Either way, it suits Todoroki. What suit was best on the mohawk? Todoroki asks, sounding genuinely curious at this point. That's an easy one. The electric blue suit you wore for that benefit party. Shouto says, clapping his hands together. I told you, that suit was a statement. But you were convinced it was hideous. It sort of was, Todoroki says. He seems to be amused at finding himself ganged up on. Maybe I was too young to realize its worth at the time. Shouto swats the air dismissively. He's as young as you were, but he's putting you to shame. He must have an eye for this. Oh, no, I really don't, Izuku says. He can see Todoroki's mouth twitch and knows he's thinking, maroon. I just know what looks good on Todoroki-san. You are the expert, Shouto says. So, what do you suggest now? Izuku had expected Shouto to make the final decision either way, but Todoroki seems to be interested in hearing his answer as well. He puts his chin in his palm, thinking hard. Todoroki's hair now is the opposite of those early styles. He reminds Izuku of a film star as much as a pro hero, sometimes. His look these days is understated and classy, mature. Something dark, Izuku says, nodding decisively. Kinda. Mysterious. Shouto says, approving. He taps the side of his nose conspiratorially. I think I have just the thing. Finished, announces the seamstress altering the suit Izuku is wearing. Midoriya-sama, turn so we can see, Shouto says, and Izuku does as asked. He turns in a slow, full circle. Behind him is a mirror, and he pauses when he sees his reflection. The suit is fitted absolutely perfectly. The cut makes his normally skinny frame look lean and slender instead. The light shade of the gray doesn't distract from the dark green of his hair and eyes, and actually seems to make the color pop, as he imagines a person who knows much more about these sorts of things than himself would say. It makes him look pretty okay, he thinks. He thinks he could wear this to the gala and not feel like he's embarrassing himself or Todoroki. He turns back to face the other two again, smiling nervously, and stops at the look on Todoroki's face. Todoroki is staring, too, staring at all of Izuku. His lips are parted slightly, as if in shock, and his eyes are darting everywhere, taking in what seems like every inch of Izuku, studying him from head to toe. The way he's looking makes Izuku's face start to burn hot. But it doesn't feel like nerves, as usual. He's Todoroki-san, he says breathlessly. Is this okay? Todoroki swallows. Then he seems to snap out of whatever weird trance he's in, nodding jerkily. It looks perfect. Now Izuku starts to blush from shyness. He can only nod back, too awkward and flustered to actually say anything. We'll take it, Todoroki tells Shouto. Not long after the fitting, Todoroki leaves Japan for a mission overseas. He can't say much about it to Izuku, only that he'll be back about a week before the gala. Izuku spends the next few days in a fit of anxious excitement, reading up on all the info about the event, the heroes who will be in attendance, the awards that will be presented. It seems like time is passing both too quickly and very slowly. On the weekend, he decides to visit his mom, just to combat some of the jitters. Inko has been made well aware of all the recent escalating craziness in his life, and though she can't quite keep up with the level of his intensity, she does her best. She understands the freakouts, at least. After all, his room is only covered in Shouto posters, and the merch is all he wanted for birthdays when asked for the past 8 years. So, you're staying overnight for the gala? His mom asks, as Izuku helps her make dinner. It's a quiet Saturday evening. The TV is on in the background, and the hero news program and running water and quick chopping of vegetables are all familiar sounds, a backdrop he's familiar with. It does help him feel calm. Yeah, just the one night, at some fancy hotel, Izuku tells her. Todoroki gave him the name. It's 5-star and looks very nice. Oh, his mom says, smiling. Seems kind of serious. I hope it'll be more fun than serious, Izuku says, and she laughs. I didn't mean the event. I meant you, she explains. This relationship you have with Todoroki-san. He likes you. Izuku stops cutting potatoes to look at her. His mother is smiling as she cooks, little crow's feet around her eyes wrinkled with happiness. Izuku shouts as he realizes what she's suggesting. Mom, no, what? Izuku, she says. You've been on 2 dates already. And now the gala. 2, he splutters. Where are you getting these numbers? There was the time he invited you to see his agency. That was a tour. And the time he took you to get a suit, which he paid for. Because I needed one, Izuku points out. It was just a suit fitting. And you had dinner together afterwards. She asks, like he needs reminding. Yes, but he made reservations, and Ko says. This is all true. They'd gone to eat at one of the fancy restaurants in the area after the tailor. Izuku isn't actually sure, though, if Todoroki made reservations or if the waitstaff just let them in upon recognizing who he was. But it wasn't there was nothing special about it, besides the fact that he was having actual dinner at an actual restaurant with actual Todoroki Shouto. It was just dinner, because they were friends, like Todoroki had told Izuku's clubmates. It wasn't like that, he says to his mom. Todoroki is just really nice. But I don't mind that at all. I like being his friend. Izuku, Inko says again, but it's not teasing anymore, just warm. She stands on her toes, and he ducks down slightly so she can kiss his forehead. I know you do, and I like that he likes being your friend, too. They smile at each other, and it's then that a few snatches of a breaking news report on TV catch Izuku's attention. Brought into a local hospital after suffering injuries during a villain encounter overseas. The young hero was apparently working an undercover mission at the time. Izuku turns, feeling like he's moving in slow motion. He hears his mother gasp, right as he sees the TV and the news report and the picture of Todoroki overlaid on top of footage from whatever fight had taken place. He blinks, unable to process what he's seeing at first. Then it sinks in. Todoroki got hurt. The news report continues on. Although he is expected to recover, it was surely a very worrying brush with disaster. At this time, neither Shouto's agency or hospital officials are currently releasing any information to the public. Shouto, oh God, Izuku says softly. Mom, sorry, She doesn't try to stop him when he runs to his room, shutting the door behind him to dig out his phone. For a minute, he feels frozen. Is it all right for him to try to contact Todoroki? Will Todoroki even want to hear from him right now? Sheet, Izuku murmurs, before he sends a text, fingers shaking. Izuku, please be okay. He's not expecting a reply right away, and he doesn't get one. For a long time he sits staring at his phone, before he slumps sideways on his bed. He doesn't feel tired at all, so he just lays there, staring at the walls. Todoroki. Well, hot and cold hero Shouto stares back at him from every surface. Posters, figurines, photographs. Izuku has them all, treasures each one that he's carefully and lovingly researched and added to his collection over the years. For his whole adolescence, he dreamed in this room of what it would be like to be a hero, to be somebody, to be on equal footing with this man. Shouto is his hero, but Todoroki Shouto is human. Like his quirk, he is two halves of some unnameable whole. Todoroki is hot and cold. He's intimidating and kind, serious and funny. Unreadable sometimes, and an open book at others. And as much as Izuku idolized him as a hero, he feels something so much more for the person he's come to know. His mom knocks on his door later to quietly ask if he can eat anything, but he says he's not hungry. His stomach can't handle it right now. Eventually, without realizing he's fading, he falls asleep with his phone clutched in his hand. It's his phone buzzing that wakes him up, hours later in the middle of the night. Not a call, a text message. He gasps, instantly wide awake when he sees it. Todoroki. It's okay. I'm fine. Izuku doesn't even think before he dials Todoroki's number. It's the first time he's called Todoroki in response to a text, instead of the other way around. It barely rings before the line picks up. Midoriya, I didn't want to wake you up. Todoroki-san, Izuku says. His voice cracks, and Todoroki stops speaking mid-sentence. Todoroki-san. Todoroki's voice is soft when he murmurs, you were worried. Izuku starts babbling. The news only just said you were expected to recover, and I didn't know what that meant. I know that's stupid, but I couldn't stop thinking. He trails off. He kept thinking of terrible things. He's mad at himself for even considering them, because he knows Todoroki is strong. But texting Todoroki, and not having him call back right away for once, was so scary. You couldn't stop thinking. We'd missed the gala. Todoroki fills in. Izuku gapes into the dark of his room. I didn't think of that once. Todoroki snorts, and Izuku gasps. Are you teasing me right now? No, well, Todoroki amends quickly. I figured you weren't worried about that. But I didn't want to make you miss out, so maybe I was projecting. We'll definitely make it, though. Todoroki-san, I don't care about the gala at all right now, Izuku says sternly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. He can't believe this. Todoroki is lying injured in some foreign hospital somewhere, mocking him. What a terrible, wonderful man. I am, Todoroki reassures him. It was just some bad cuts, a dislocated shoulder, mild concussion. That doesn't sound okay, Izuku says, as heat pricks at the corner of his eyes. I've been through far worse, Todoroki tells him. Remember how I almost died the first time we met? Yeah, but you didn't wind up in the hospital, Izuku argues. That's true, Todoroki concedes. I guess it's because you weren't here to help me this time. Izuku's breath shudders. For some stupid reason, this is what sets him off. It's ridiculous. It was a 1 in a million chance how they met. And even slimmer odds that Izuku managed to protect Todoroki, let alone save his life. And still, if he could do it again, if he could spare Todoroki from getting hurt. Todoroki says, when he realizes what's happening. No, that was a bad joke. I'm sorry, don't cry. Izuku bites his lip to try and stop, but it's never that easy for him. It was just a lot worse than I thought it would be. Hearing about it, it's the way my job works, Todoroki says. I know I'm being an idiot, but Shouto, he stops. He's never, not once, called Todoroki that before. That wasn't a hero Shouto, that was a first name Shouto. That was an accident. He wipes his eyes desperately with his sleeve. Sorry. You're not. No, I really am. You're not an idiot, Todoroki clarifies. I appreciate you worrying about me. Oh, you don't have to be sorry about calling me that, either. Izuku knows Todoroki wouldn't be mad about it. He's very informal himself, and he doesn't seem to care about social hierarchy or that he's older than Izuku or anything like that. But it feels like something really big to Izuku. Izuku, Todoroki says. Izuku lets out a soft gasp that he is sure still carries over the phone. Todoroki has never used his first name, either, only ever called him Midoriya. His name, said by Todoroki, sounds. He curls into a ball on his side, phone pressed to his ear, mouth wobbling hopelessly. Why yes, you can call me Shouto. Like your hero name. Todoroki's laugh is low and quiet and sweet in his ear. Izuku shuts his eyes and thinks, helplessly, about his mouth. His lips. His voice is so close. No, Todoroki says, my actual name. Izuku exhales, very shakily and all in a rush. Oh gosh. I don't think I can do that. It's not mandatory. Todoroki relents, still sounding amused. Sorry, don't be, Todoroki says. Thank you, again, for checking on me. You should sleep, though. Yeah, Izuku says. It's 3 a.m. See you in a few days. Looking forward to it, Todoroki says. There's a long silence on both ends of the line. Mido, do we have to hang up? Izuku blurts out. What the hell, what a weird thing to. No, it takes Izuku a moment to register what Todoroki has said. He's still reeling from his own audacity. He bites his lip. I don't want to hang up, he confesses. Then I won't, Todoroki says. Simple as that. Eventually, at his insistence, Izuku puts him on speaker, laying the phone next to him on his pillow. The sound is a bit fuzzy, but he can hear Todoroki's breathing, slow and calm. Maybe Izuku should feel weird, but he just feels relieved. He doesn't have to hang up and go back to staring at Todoroki on his walls, knowing he's really in a hospital bed somewhere with a concussion. As he falls asleep, Izuku can't help but think about what it means that this adoration he's always had for the hero in his posters pales in comparison to how much he cares about the real Todoroki. Izuku keeps in touch with Todoroki throughout the rest of his hospital stay, so he knows when he gets released and when he's flying back to Japan. Still, when there's a knock on his apartment door the same evening Todoroki happens to return, Izuku doesn't have a clue who it could be. He's entirely caught off guard when he opens it to find Todoroki standing there in a hoodie and sweats, his hair messy and unstyled, carrying a plastic bag that turns out to be takeout. You're here, Izuku squeaks, an unnecessary question considering yes, Todoroki is very clearly there on Izuku's doorstep in all his dressed-down glory. My flight just landed, Todoroki says. Is now a bad time? A bad time for what? Izuku wonders. For a famous pro-hero, an extreme object of his affection to show up unannounced at his door. No, come in, he says. He stands aside to let Todoroki slip past him. As Izuku shuts the door, he thinks he should have thought this through better, because suddenly his tiny apartment contains exactly 100% more Todoroki than it did before, and he's not sure what to do about it. Did you already eat? Todoroki asks. No, Izuku says. I brought you curry. Todoroki tells him, somewhat hopefully, like maybe the food will result in him being better received. Oh, that's so. He wants to say nice, or convey how thankful he is in some way. But now that Todoroki has stepped into the light of his apartment, Izuku can see the signs of the fight he'd been in overseas. There's a fading bruise on his jaw and a mostly healed cut on his cheek, and Izuku forgets what he started to say because his chest goes all sore with worry again. At the same time, his stomach goes fuzzy and hot with something else. Todoroki is very attractive when he's a bit roughed up. I should have called ahead, Todoroki says abruptly. I didn't know if you'd be here. But I knew if I told you I was coming you'd feel like you had to meet me, and I didn't want it to be an inconvenience, so I just showed up. But now that feels like maybe even more of an inconvenience. He trails off awkwardly, and Izuku realizes that his own lack of response is probably unnerving Todoroki. Izuku waves his hands anxiously. No, sorry, Izuku starts to say, and then stops because he still doesn't know what to say. He's so happy to see Todoroki he can't even find the words to tell him. It's not an inconvenience. It's not. Todoroki asks. Nope. Izuku gives him an encouraging thumbs up for good measure. Not at all. Todoroki stares at the plastic bag of food he's holding. I was just thinking about what your reaction would be if I surprised you with takeout curry, Izuku says. Not that he'd turn his nose up at that. It's just so cute. He reaches out to take the food, and Todoroki relinquishes it. And coming here, Todoroki clarifies. Izuku blinks at him. You came here just to surprise me. Todoroki starts to nod, and then shakes his head. Actually, I don't know what I was. I'll just go now. I know you're probably in the middle of studying. Or, he starts to reach for the door. Wait, Izuku yelps. Todoroki freezes, and Izuku panics slightly. He doesn't really get why Todoroki wanted to do all this, but he doesn't want Todoroki to leave either. You should stay. Oh, only if you want to. Though, sorry, I'm not trying to make you. Todoroki is giving him this look like he has no idea what Izuku is trying to say, which is fair, because neither does Izuku. I want you to stay. I just can't believe you're here. I'm so happy you are, though. Oh, this makes Todoroki smile faintly. I wanted to see you when I got back. Izuku presses the backs of his hands to his cheeks as he feels them grow hot. His mom's words keep bubbling up in his head. He likes you, he likes you, he likes you. Well, okay, it's definitely true that people probably don't pay visits to someone they don't like immediately after flying home from an international business trip that ended with them in the hospital. Izuku has logically had to accept a while ago that Todoroki does like spending time with him, but he still can't wrap his head around what his mom is talking about. There's no way Todoroki could like him that way. How could he? Todoroki is amazing, and he could find someone amazing to be with as easily as breathing if he wanted. He deserves to fall for someone amazing. And Izuku is fine with that, because even getting to be Todoroki's friend is so much more than he'd ever dreamed would happen. He smiles back at Todoroki. I'm glad you're home safely. And kind of starving, Todoroki admits. Oh, I'll clear some space. If there's one thing Izuku can say about his life, it's that it has led him to places he never thought it would. Primarily, sitting on his bed eating curry out of plastic containers with Todoroki Shouto while they discuss his vast collection of hero figurines. So, that one's your favorite, Todoroki says, pointing at the detailed 7-inch figure of All Might that Izuku has been waxing on about fondly for several minutes. Yes, Izuku says. It was extremely limited edition, too. I actually begged my mom to let me stay home from school that day to try and buy him as soon as they started selling it, and she let me. He'd scared her half to death with the volume of his scream after he'd managed to get one. Todoroki makes a noise of appreciation. I wish I could have got one of those, too. You couldn't? Izuku asks, surprised. With how rich and well-connected the Todorokis are, he can't imagine it being a problem. My old man would have made me train until I puked if I'd tried to pull that, Todoroki tells him. He was never really too happy about All Might being my favorite hero. He is. Izuku gasps. Yeah, Todoroki says. By the time I got to high school, I thought I'd outgrown stuff like that, but All Might proved me wrong. He's as amazing as everyone always says. Izuku lets out a wheeze of excitement. Really? Todoroki nods. Eraserhead is, too. He was her homeroom teacher, Izuku says excitedly. He can barely even comprehend something so cool. Yeah, Todoroki says, and he kicked my ass almost every day. What was the training like? Izuku asks. At Yui, there's a lot of info about Yui, but very little about the standard curriculum is known. In fact, it tends to be a pretty closely guarded secret, both for the safety and the success of its students. This is Izuku's chance to learn from one of its brightest alumni. Brutal, Todoroki tells him. I learned more in 3 years there about using my quirk than I had the rest of my life. Even though Endeavor trained you, Todoroki shakes his head. My relationship with my dad was a lot worse when I was younger. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed it's still pretty shaky now. But I was I was kind of fed up when I got to Yui. Izuku listens to all this with wide eyes. If you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. It's just not really a pleasant story, Todoroki says. I had no intention of giving anyone the time of day when I started high school, really. I just wanted to get out and reach the top on my own, so I could prove to my dad that everything he'd tried to teach me was bullshit. And I was kind of right, in some ways. Did you, really never use your left side? Izuku asks softly. He's heard stories about that, and still remembers the first sports festival at Yui, where Todoroki had shot through the rankings, only to be finally taken down by a young Bakugo when he'd refused to engage with his fire. Todoroki had taken second place that year. Yeah, Todoroki confirms. I hated it, hated my dad, what he'd made my life into. And a lot of what he'd taught me was wrong, because being a hero isn't just about being the strongest, but I didn't really get it yet, then, either. I just wanted to be the best to get back at him. Aizawa-sensei. And All Might, and everyone in my class helped me figure things out eventually, but I was a completist for a long time. Todoroki is so laid back these days. But Izuku can kind of imagine him, 16 and full of himself, and probably a whole lot ruder than he is now. It makes Izuku happy to know that all these people he looks up to as pro-heroes now have been helping Todoroki right from the start. And hearing that Todoroki hasn't always been fearlessly confident, and was just as unsure of himself back then as a normal kid, makes him seem a bit less untouchable. You know, I started using my fire more because it actually made people less afraid of me, Todoroki says. Not more, like I thought it would. I didn't want everyone to think I was just cold all the time. Izuku pulls his knees up to rest his chin on them thoughtfully. I think people would have figured it out, even if you only had a nice quirk. Maybe, Todoroki says, but it took me a while to even realize I couldn't always be like that. Not if I wanted to become the hero I dreamed about being as a kid. A hero like All Might, Izuku says quietly. A thought strikes him, and he shifts until he's sitting facing Todoroki, so he can stare directly at him with as much earnest intent as he can muster. Todoroki looks wary. Wouldn't it be amazing? Todoroki-san. Todoroki sighs. You're relentless. If you won Rescue of the Year. Izuku continues, leaning forward in his conviction. Todoroki leans back. All Might won it when he was just starting out. Yes, and then several more times, I'm aware. It would be like you're following in his footsteps. Izuku points out, hands held toward Todoroki placatingly. Just like you wanted. It wouldn't, Todoroki says. He slowly reaches out, pressing on Izuku's hands to push them back down. You took down that villain, and I was able to rescue all those kids because you got them to the fire escape. If I win this, it would be like I'm taking credit for you following in All Might's footsteps. What? Izuku says weakly. Todoroki-san. That's what I keep trying to tell you, Todoroki says. I owe that all to you. I don't even feel like I deserve. No, Izuku's voice is so firm it startles them both. Todoroki stops talking, eyes wide. Izuku takes a deep breath and leans closer again. This time Todoroki doesn't pull away. You deserve it, Izuku says. Because I couldn't have stopped that fire escape from falling. And I couldn't have saved Hana no matter how hard I tried. And you were ready to protect us, even when you couldn't use your quirk. You were just as normal as me at that moment. And I bet that's even scarier when you've always had a quirk to rely on before. Todoroki doesn't deny that it was scary. I haven't thought about it like that. I know, Izuku says. That's why I'm telling you now. But in the end, Todoroki says, frowning, I still wouldn't have survived if not for you. Well, I guess we rescued each other. Then, Izuku says with a roll of his eyes. Todoroki's smile seems to indicate he can accept this. They can't nominate me, though, so I guess you just have to go and win for both of us. Something in Todoroki's expression clears. And when he nods again, Izuku doesn't see any more doubt in his eyes. I see. Oh, Izuku says. Somehow, he hadn't expected that to be the thing that convinced Todoroki. It makes his stomach all fluttery and light. Good. Yeah. Todoroki glances at him. Midoriya, you don't mind talking about this. We can stop. Izuku waves his hand. I'm fine. I gave up on wanting to be a hero like All Might a long time ago, so it doesn't upset me anymore. It's amazing to hear about this actually. It's stuff I've always wanted to know about you. He worries at his lip with his fingers. Sorry if that's weird. Well, I'm probably the best person to ask, Todoroki reassures him. Izuku smiles. Thanks for the honest answers. Anytime, Todoroki says. Also, your turn. For what? Honesty, Todoroki says. Izuku sucks in a breath and holds it. For a moment, he's worried that Todoroki is going to ask about his feelings. That maybe he already knows. Maybe he thinks he has to let Izuku down gently, or something. That would be embarrassing enough, but also unnecessary, because Izuku wouldn't dream of trying to push any of that on Todoroki. But if Todoroki feels like he does, then Izuku must be making him uncomfortable, and once it's out in the open, it can't be taken back. Why am I your favorite hero, after All Might? Todoroki asks. Oh, Izuku exhales all his breath in a relieved whoosh. It takes him a moment to respond. As he processes the question, relieved it wasn't something infinitely more embarrassing. Todoroki-san, why wouldn't you be? There's so many other heroes, Todoroki exclaims, startling Izuku with how animated he suddenly is. He seems genuinely perplexed. What about Lemillion? He's All Might's successor. He's amazing, too, Izuku says. He is a pretty huge Lemillion fanboy, for sure. Then, Izuku fights the urge to cover his face. Todoroki has just told him so much, and only asked for honesty in return. Izuku can give him that much. Because, you remember how I said in the interview it was because I could tell how you try to reassure people? Todoroki nods, and he continues hesitantly. I think before you, I felt a little bit like even if I'd had a great quirk, I could never have been a hero like All Might, or Hawks, or even Lemillion when he first came out of Yui. I could never make people like me the way they do. I'm too. Todoroki looks like he gets it. Too awkward. Izuku sighs. Yeah, I mean, you've met me. So you're saying you could see I was awkward as F and sensed a kindred spirit? Todoroki concludes. Basically, Izuku says, laughing, because it's true. Less so, as Todoroki has grown more confident over the years. But 18-year-old Todoroki Shouto was a whirlwind of brusque replies, blank stares, and awkwardly long pauses. But you're still the kind of hero who makes people feel safe. I don't really have the tall, brooding, handsome thing going for me, though, so it was probably always hopeless, anyway. That's incidental, Todoroki says. For what it's worth, I really think that all the stuff I didn't get about being a hero, back then, in high school, you just do. You get it. Izuku opens his mouth wide, and no words come out. It was All Might who used to tell us the story of what all the top heroes have in common, Todoroki says quietly. That the first time they ever faced danger, they moved before they had a chance to think, to save people. And that's what I saw you do. I think All Might would definitely consider you a hero. There's really no way for Izuku to respond to anyone telling him that, let alone Todoroki. He just stares glassily and wonders if he may be going into shock. Thanks, he finally manages to whisper. Todoroki shrugs. You deserve to know, even if you're past it. And none of that even matters anymore. I liked you right away. Todoroki-san, Izuku says, that matters. Good, Todoroki replies. They both sit in silence for a while. Izuku would like to say more, but he also feels like he could never speak again for the rest of his life, and that would be just fine. After a moment, Todoroki says, I really didn't mean to make things all intense and awkward, but apparently that's why you like me, so. The seriousness dissipates as quickly as it came on once Izuku starts giggling. I like you for more reasons than just that. Now, that's a recent development, then? Todoroki asks. Maybe. Nice. Izuku grins at him, and he grins back. Thanks for letting me hang out here tonight, Todoroki says. Thank you for dinner, Izuku replies. Thanks for calling me in the hospital. Izuku huffs another laugh. Thanks for trusting me with your number. And Todoroki smiles at him. Thanks for saving me. The morning of the gala arrives a week after Todoroki gets back home. Against all odds, Izuku wakes up and discovers he's not anxious. He is a little nervous, but it's not the restless, audible heartbeat kind of anxiety he gets when he's really unable to stop worrying about something. It's only a soft flutter, these nerves, and he realizes it's more excitement than anything else that stirred him awake. Despite the monumental occasion lying ahead of him, he's not that fixated on what he might mess up. He's so eager to see Todoroki again that it overrides most of the potential mental stumbling blocks. Mostly, it helps to know that Todoroki is looking forward to seeing him again, too. Even though the gala isn't until that evening, the day gets started pretty early. A car comes to pick Izuku up from his dorm at 10:30. And shortly after 11 he's being dropped off onto the tarmac of a private runway offshoot at the airport. A gleaming white jet is waiting, and Todoroki along with it, standing at the foot of the air stairs. He waves when Izuku gets out of the car, and Izuku beelines for him, hitching his backpack up around his shoulders excitedly. He still can't really believe he gets to fly on Todoroki's private plane. After you, Todoroki tells him, and Izuku books it up the air stairs and steps into the very height of luxury transportation. Whoa, he breathes, taking in the interior, a sleek, futuristic space that mixes dark wooden furniture with stark white and black accents to exude a feeling of class over opulence. There's literal couches in there, and separate rooms, and a dining area. He's never even been on a normal plane, let alone one that puts any other first-class cabin to shame. He'd heard about pro-hero transportation and how fancy some of them tended to fly, but actually seeing it with his own eyes is beyond cool. Can I take pictures? Izuku asks. Go for it, Todoroki says, coming up the stairs behind him. I know it's slightly over the top, but it does make traveling for work much more bearable. Can't argue with that, someone says, and Izuku pauses with his phone poised to snap a photo right as two more people emerge from one of the little lounge areas. He gasps loudly and claps a hand over his mouth. Pro-heroes Uravity and Cellophane wave at them cheerfully. Izuku stares at them both, and does not wave back, because he's far too busy freaking out internally to move or respond. Seriously, as long as you keep letting us fly with you, I promise we won't make fun of your swanky-ass plane, Siro says. He turns his always-on grin towards Izuku. Yo, I'm Siro. Nice to meet you. I'm Ochako, Uraraka says, and oh my gosh, she is even happier and cuter in person than she looks on TV. You're Midoriya Izuku, right? Izuku can only make some kind of wheezing noise in response to their entirely unnecessary introductions. Sorry, I forgot to warn you, Todoroki says. Ochako and Hanta are flying with us to Hokkaido because they're both freeloaders. Siro puts a hand over his heart. Wow, we're just trying to make sure you have company. And this is the thanks we get. Uraraka claps her hands together, saving time and money. Thanks again, Todoroki-kun. Todoroki shakes his head fondly. Anyway, yes, this is Midoriya-kun. It is such an honor to meet both of you, Izuku says in a rush, bowing frantically, before jabbing Todoroki in the ribs. The hero jerks in surprise and rubs at his side, staring at Izuku in shock. You didn't actually forget to warn me, you just wanted to watch me lose it. Todoroki scratches his chin. Admit it. Oh, he isn't afraid to call Todoroki out at all. Uraraka says, I like him already. Izuku blushes, but doesn't deny it. He is getting pretty good at figuring out when Todoroki's expressionless face is carefully hiding his mischievous gremlin scheming. Fortunately, his schemes tend to be good-natured, as far as Izuku is concerned, and this time he appears to be mostly interested in surprising Izuku with a hangout involving two of his favorite heroes, aboard a private jet on their way to a high-profile event where Izuku will undoubtedly get to meet even more. Geez, how is this even Izuku's real life anymore? He barely has time to wonder, because Uraraka and Siro are the polar opposite of Todoroki. They're both non-stop talkers, with sharp senses of humor, something Izuku has witnessed in plenty of interviews of the two of them. It's a lot more like being caught up in a whirlwind when most of it is directed right at him, though. He's already pretty overstimulated by just being on a plane for the first time in his life. That's a window, Todoroki tells him as the engine starts to whir louder outside the cabin. You can adjust the transparency from that panel. Izuku slides his fingers over the glossy touch screen Todoroki has indicated, and the black glass wall next to him shimmers and melts from completely darkened to fully transparent. So cool. He can see outside the plane now as they taxi down the runway. And then they're tilting, and he presses his face to the glass, momentarily forgetting his nervousness about getting it dirty and his excitement as the ground drops away underneath them. A soothing voice announces over the cabin speakers that the flight will be about an hour and a half. Zero stretches with a satisfied sigh. This is the life. Todoroki, remind me to repay the favor when I finally break into the top 20 pros, like 15 years from now. He wipes a fake tear from his eye and Uraraka laughs. That can't be more than 4 years away, though, Izuku says, without thinking. All three of them look at him. Zero grins. Oh, man, you don't have to try and make me feel better. I'm not actually bothered by it. We just like to get on his case. I'm the easiest target when Bakugo's not here, Todoroki says. Exactly. Oh, Izuku says. Sorry, right. You probably have the numbers already. He doesn't want Zero to think he's being nosy. What numbers? Zero asks. Just the trajectory numbers, Izuku says. For your hero rank. Zero laughs out loud. Oh, those. Forget it. I'm barely in the top 50. My agency isn't going to waste resources on hiring an analyst for me. Is it really costly? Izuku asks. He had no idea. It's super expensive. Uraraka says. I've actually taken some courses for calculating it, so I can kind of do my own, but she scrunches up her face in displeasure. There's so many variables. I just don't even bother, Zero says, waving a hand. Well, Izuku says, nervously. Should he tell them? You've done it, haven't you? Todoroki asks. He's doing that sideways glance thing at Izuku. Zero and Uraraka look between the two of them. Done what? Uraraka asks. IG got curious. Izuku says. So, I may have figured out the rank trajectory for Todoroki-san's graduating class. The others gape at him. What? Zero finally says. Our whole class. Uraraka asks incredulously. Why? It was fun. Izuku offers. He's met with blank stares. I can show you, actually. He grabs his backpack by his feet and pulls out a notebook and pencil. About 20 minutes later, the tea table near them is covered in little pastries, steaming mugs of tea, and sheafs of notepaper with Izuku's equations littered all over them. The four of them pore over the notes. Top 20 by next fall. Uraraka says delightedly. That's way faster than I thought. It's all my best guesswork, pretty much. Izuku says hesitantly. But I really think you could do it, Uraraka-san. Especially if you win tonight for most popular, which I'm pretty sure you will. Izuku-kan, Uraraka says, shocked. There's just no way the other nominees are. There's really no point in arguing with him, Todoroki says distractedly. He's comparing two stat sheets, looking back and forth between them with his brow furrowed. I've had to sit through meetings about this stuff. It's always guesswork, but these look like very good guesses. Todoroki, Zero says, very seriously, you gotta share with the rest of us. You can't snatch Midoriya up and hog him all to yourself once he graduates. This statement startles Izuku so much he knocks his pencil off the table. He dives down to retrieve it, cheeks blazing red. He's not a vending machine item, Todoroki's voice says from somewhere above him. Besides, he's going to have lots of opportunities. He'll be able to choose whatever interests him most. Izuku doesn't reemerge immediately after locating his dropped pencil. He knows his thoughts must show on his face and he's too embarrassed to let the others see. He desperately wants to ask Todoroki what he means. Is it something he's thought about, too? Could Izuku apply to work at Todoroki's agency that easily, even without a quirk? Or is Todoroki trying to let him down gently, guide him away from the possibility? Or maybe this, like the trajectories he's just calculated, is all conjecture anyway. Midoriya, realizing too late that he's started mumbling. Izuku quickly tries to straighten up and bumps the top of his head on the underside of the table. He yelps, "Are you okay?" Todoroki asks. "I'm fine," Izuku says. Maybe the bump on the head will cover up why he looks like such a deer in headlights. All of a sudden, he hopes anyway. Todoroki-san, the bathroom. That last door toward the back of the cabin, Todoroki directs him. Thanks, Izuku says, scurrying away quickly. He sighs as he locks the door behind himself. He doesn't have to use the bathroom. He just needed a place to regain his composure. The last thing he wanted tonight was for all his expectations and questions and uncertainties to get in the way of just enjoying things. He splashes his face with cold water vigorously. This gala is the pinnacle of coolest things he will ever do in his life, and he doesn't want to let his brain ruin the event or the time he actually gets to spend with Todoroki. Izuku chews on his lip. It's felt for a while like things have been building up to this weekend. all the phone calls, the time they've spent together. After this, what happens? Todoroki is immeasurably busy, with things and people all far more important than Izuku. He can't continue indefinitely making time for Izuku like he has been, and Izuku would never expect him to. But he also can't help but wonder how often he'll see Todoroki after the gala is over and done with. Lost in thought, he bites down on his lip too hard, nearly breaking the skin. Oh, he winces, licking the sore spot tenderly. The image of Todoroki appears in his mind unbidden, licking his lips as he watches Izuku talk, and his friend's voice in his head reminds him he seems very focused. His mom's voice comes next, a knowing smile and an even more knowing, "He likes you." And then, a memory of Izuku's name in that voice, right in his ear. Todoroki murmuring, "Izuku, okay." Izuku yelps frantically, cranking on the cold water again. There's a shower in here. Maybe he should just dunk his whole head under. No, that would definitely look suspicious when he comes out. He wets his face again and then dries it with one of the fluffy hand towels. "I am calm," he tells his reflection in the mirror. "I am totally cool and I am not thinking about kissing Todoroki." Wait, what? Why is he thinking about kissing Todoroki? The soothing voice that announced their takeoff filters over speakers in the bathroom, and he nearly jumps out of his skin. "We may be experiencing some slight turbulence. We would like to ask all passengers to please take their seats." He's just gonna have to pull it together. He pats his cheeks and unlocks the door, heading back to where the others are sitting. Right as he passes by Todoroki, the whole plane hits a pocket of rough air, lurching unexpectedly and completely unbalancing Izuku. He flails, but before he can fall flat on his and injure himself a second time, Todoroki shoots a hand out and grabs him around the waist. Izuku topples over with a squeak and finds himself suddenly seated very securely in Todoroki's lap. Well, there goes any last hope of staying calm. "Oh," Shiro says, eyebrows raised at them. "Rescue of the year." Uraraka giggles. "Thank you, I'm so sorry, thank you," Izuku says shrilly. Oh no, Todoroki is so warm, and also so much bigger, looking down at Izuku with an arm still wrapped around his waist. Any heat Izuku had managed to dissipate from his face with all the cold water splashing has immediately rushed back in. His cheeks feel molten hot. "Sorry, you don't have to apologize," Todoroki says. "I do, though," Izuku thinks hopelessly. But Todoroki doesn't know that, because he is unaware of how carefully Izuku is mentally filing away every detail regarding the entire experience of Todoroki Shouto's warm lap. Todoroki helps him scoot over to sit on the sofa next to him, just as the plane rolls again. It's a bit dizzying, and makes Izuku's stomach swoop strangely, though not as much as literally falling into Todoroki's lap had. "Izuku-kun, do you want some water?" Uraraka asks kindly. He looks kinda pale. "Shouto, this is pretty routine turbulence," Todoroki explains, perhaps mistaking Izuku's mortified silence for nerves. Uraraka hands Todoroki a glass of ice water that he passes to Izuku. "We'll be landing soon." Izuku nods, not daring to look at him, but the conversation between Todoroki and his friends resumes quickly enough, without anyone dwelling on the weirdness of the moment. Todoroki reclines back against the couch, stretching his arm over the backrest behind Izuku. The next time the plane judders, causing Izuku to jump, he feels a gentle hand ruffle his hair briefly. Todoroki scoots over slightly so their legs are almost touching, and Izuku glances at him, but the hero is still engrossed in talking to Shiro and Uraraka about what some of their classmates have been up to recently. It's not wholly unexpected, since Todoroki has always seemed more willing to look past his awkwardness than most people. Still, it helps Izuku to relax, and before too long he's staring out the plane windows at Kato below them as they come in for their landing. They part ways with the other two heroes as they all head to their respective hotels to get ready for the evening. It takes some time to get to where Todoroki and Izuku will be staying by car, and they pass the drive discussing who will be in attendance and who might win some of the awards that year. Izuku can barely keep his jaw from dropping as they pull up through the impressive entryway of the hotel. It looks even more beautiful than it did in the pictures, a luxury Ryokan-style resort with a modern touch, tranquil even amidst the bustle of the city. The staff is expecting them, and they don't even have to check in at the concierge. Instead, they are discreetly taken up to their rooms on the uppermost floors, where Todoroki has booked 2 suites for their overnight stay. There is, apparently, personal concierge service on offer, as well as a butler, though Izuku can't imagine what he might possibly need a butler for. And Todoroki reassures him before he heads to his own room. If Izuku needs anything, he's right down the hall. They'll be reconvening again at 4:30 in just a couple hours, so Izuku thinks he will be able to manage that long on his own. He ends up wasting a fair amount of time documenting everything about the room as soon as the staff have departed. The bed is enormous and soft when he faceplants directly into it. The windows have an incredible view, looking out over the whole city towards the distant mountain range. The bathroom is similarly stunning, with a full sunken tub that he desperately wants to try. He sends about 24 pictures to his mom, which she exclaims very satisfactorily over, before he gets interrupted by a knock on the door. "Hello, Midoriya-kun." Eiko greets him when he opens it, to admit her and what seems to be a small army of stylists. "Shouto told you we were coming, right?" "Oh, yes," Izuku says. His flushed face and permanently surprised expression probably give off the impression that he was not expecting this. He was, it's just that he forgot, in all his excitement over the suite. "Come in." Eiko introduces him to the stylist team. And barely has he said hello to everyone that they start pushing their hands into his hair and turning his head this way and that. "I'm going to check on Shouto now," Eiko tells him cheerfully, as he is dragged away to his fashionable fate. "You're in good hands, Midoriya-kun." As it turns out, he is in very good hands, in addition to all the experts who make sure Todoroki is always field ready. He has an extremely capable team working behind the scenes to ensure he's always camera ready for events like these, as well. This, Izuku suspects, is more Eiko's doing than Todoroki himself, but he's certainly the last person to complain, given the incredibly vast array of Todoroki pictures he's saved to his phone and various computer folders over the years. And now, they're hellbent on turning that same expertise on him. They end up washing his hair again so they can style it properly, blow-drying it after putting some fancy, nice-smelling product in it to make it manageable instead of messy. Somehow, they get his bangs to fall to the side a little bit, half off his forehead. It makes his hair look more deliberately rumpled as opposed to wildly untamable. No, one of them, the woman who seems to be in charge of the team, says, right before another can start dabbing some kind of beige, skin-colored cream on Izuku's cheeks. Eiko-san said nothing on his face. The other one clicks her tongue. "He's so pale, though." "He's fine," says the first, waving her hand. "Todoroki-san likes all these freckles." Izuku gapes at her. Did he say that?" "That's what Eiko said," the woman tells him, and if it comes from her, that means he as good as said it. Izuku rubs his cheeks hard. She smacks his hand away. "You're going to make your face blotchy." He really doesn't know what to do with the new information he's been given. And now that his hair is done, he's pretty much good to go. All that's left is to change into his suit, which has been freshly pressed and delivered to his room personally. They wait until Izuku has gotten dressed to make sure everything still fits correctly. The gray suit is still perfect. And after helping him with his tie and smoothing everything into place, he's finally ready. "Thanks," he tells the team breathlessly, and they all give him encouraging nods. Right on cue, there's a knock on the door. As everyone starts to bustle around cleaning up their styling tools, Izuku hurries to answer it. It's 4:30 on the nose. He pulls it open. He's struck absolutely speechless. Todoroki stands waiting at his door. He took the words to heart when Izuku had suggested he wear something dark-colored. His suit is full black on black. Black fitted shirt under an ink dark vest, black tie. His coat, also black, is sleekly aligned with his torso to show off his distractingly strong shoulders. The pants are so dark yet so shiny, possessing a rich luster that only serves to highlight how nice Todoroki's legs are, long, powerful like the rest of him. Against the pale skin of his throat, his wrists, with his hair swept off his forehead, the suit makes him look more than just mature. He looks darkly enigmatic, like a handsome vampire from a movie or something. Like if Izuku let himself, Todoroki could steal him away and he'd be lost forever. Izuku is sure he'd never want to come back. "Wow," Izuku whispers, accidentally out loud. "Yeah," Todoroki mumbles back, which seems odd, until Izuku tears his eyes away from Todoroki's. Everything, and looks at his face, and realizes Todoroki is staring at him in return. "Oh," Izuku says, and Todoroki's gaze jerks upwards to meet his. He looks as surprised as Izuku feels. "Hi," Todoroki says. "Hi," Izuku responds. Todoroki starts to say, waving his hand vaguely above his head. "You did something to your hair." Yeah," Izuku says, before shaking his head rapidly, because he in fact did nothing. "I mean, your stylists did. They brushed it." "Oh," Todoroki says. It looks good." "Really?" Izuku asks. "Yeah, gee good," Izuku stammers, before realizing how arrogant that sounds. Your hair looks good. Not just your hair. All of you, it looks good." "Thank you," Todoroki says. Izuku puts a hand over his face. "I mean, the suit. All of Todoroki does look very, very good. But how weird does that sound?" "You recommended it," Todoroki reminds him. "I did, huh?" Izuku says. He feels very buoyant, suddenly, and can't help but giggle. It does come out somewhat hysterical, but this is surreal. "Good job, me." He might be imagining it, but he thinks Todoroki gives him another quick once-over, eyes flicking down and then back up again. "Good job on a lot of things." Izuku laughs nervously again. "Tea time to go." Todoroki nods. "If we don't want to be late." It takes about an hour to get to the venue where the gala is being held. The event doesn't officially start until 6, but there's one more important thing to do before it gets in full swing. They pull up to the curb, and as people hurry to open the car doors for them, Todoroki says, "You don't have to smile if you don't want to, just wave. And ignore all the yelling. Oh, and don't look directly into the flashes." "Wait, can you repeat?" Izuku starts to say, but then the car doors are opening, and he feels like Present Mike is shouting directly in his face, which, actually, is almost exactly what's happening. There he is, everyone's favorite, smoking hot and dashingly cool hero, Shouto. And who's that with him? The amount of camera flashes that pop off in Izuku's face blind him almost instantly. He stumbles getting out of the car, but a big, steady hand splays warm at the small of his back, making sure he doesn't fall. "I know it's the worst," Todoroki mutters to him under his breath. Actually, Izuku has gone to a lot of events like these. One of the many, many faces lining the red carpet past the roped-off barriers and security guards. He's just never been the one the cameras are pointed at. Still, he grins at Todoroki. Or at least tries to. There's still so many spots swimming in front of his eyes he can't actually tell if he's even looking at the hero. "People are just really excited to see you," he says. "I know how that is." There are tons of people in the crowd wearing Shouto merchandise, waving signs, trying to get his attention. A lot of people are pointing at Izuku. Shouto waves at them, and they get stopped for pictures and questions a couple times. Todoroki gets complimented on his choice of attire, which he seems oddly appreciative about. "Thanks," he tells the reporter. "Midoriya recommended the suit." Izuku nearly chokes on his tongue. "Not exactly." Todoroki ignores his protests, conveniently spotting something to point out in the crowd. "Midoriya, look," he says. Izuku follows the line of his arm and sees what he's pointing at. There are two girls in the crowd, both waving and yelling something. They're wearing Shouto gear, but when Izuku looks their way, they both start waving wildly. Izuku has no idea what's going on, until Todoroki says, "They're fans of yours, so you should wave back." Izuku blinks, uncomprehending. "They're what now?" He raises his hand and gives them a tiny wave, and a hesitant smile. They both start jumping up and down, squeezing each other's hands in excitement. Izuku thinks they might be screaming, and then he realizes they're shouting something about autographs. One of them holds up her Shouto poster and a pen. "Me?" Izuku asks, pointing at himself. Todoroki pushes him forward. On wobbly legs, he meets them at the velvet ropes. Most people don't pay him that much attention, still trying to get pictures of Todoroki, but Izuku signs his name as neatly as he can, with a hastily added "Thank you for saying hi. You're our hero," one of the girls tells him, and he reflexively hides behind his hands in shock, which in turn makes her also cover her face in embarrassment. "Thank you," he says, as he's hurried along by staff, who are already shepherding Todoroki towards some of the interviewers before they get inside the venue. Well, someone says as they draw near, and Izuku recognizes the very familiar face of Chargeable, who gets nearly as many gigs as a celebrity host with his electrifying personality as he does hero work. Look who it is. He's disarmingly magnetic in person, grin a million watts. So bright it nearly makes Izuku overlook the mic in his hand and the cameras following his every move. But Todoroki appears completely at ease with him, which makes it easier for Izuku to relax. "How have you been, Kaminari?" Todoroki asks. "Oh, the usual," Kaminari says. "Pretty awesome. Glad you could grace us with your presence this evening. And happy to have you back in Japan. You freaked us all out pretty good. You holding up okay after that?" Izuku vaguely recognizes the flow of an interview question, but it's casual, and Todoroki doesn't seem put off by it. Kaminari is good at what he does, especially at an event like this, where he knows so many of the attendees. He makes every interview seem like a conversation between two friends just catching up. Todoroki talks a bit about his speedy recovery following his recent injury, reassuring Kaminari that he's doing just fine. Kaminari does seem genuinely relieved to hear it, although he must have already known most of the details, given their class network. "Well, so glad you made it tonight. And, I can't help but notice. Not alone. Content just to listen." Izuku startles when attention suddenly shifts to him. He bows and waves at the camera. "Hello." Kaminari grins and turns to Todoroki. He really doesn't need it at this point, but gonna introduce us. Todoroki does that thing again, settles his hand at the base of Izuku's spine, a little protective and very calming. "This is Midoriya Izuku." "My." He looks down as Izuku glances up at him, wondering why he paused. "He's my guest." "Midoriya-kun," Kaminari says. "How are you enjoying the evening so far?" Izuku leans into the mic when it's thrust toward him. "Oh, it's amazing. I'm super excited to be here." How about yourself?" This makes Kaminari laugh. "I'm having a pretty good time. Thanks for asking. This is why everyone keeps saying he's more polite than me," Todoroki comments. To be fair, that's not hard to achieve, Kaminari says, his grin getting wider when Todoroki shakes his head, conspiratorially. Right underneath the nose of Todoroki's impassive stare, he tells Izuku, "You know this guy has never brought anybody to one of these events before, right? Like, ever." This is something Izuku knows, because what doesn't he know about Todoroki? But somehow he hasn't thought of tonight in those terms. He says, not sure what exactly he's supposed to say to this. I feel very lucky to be here tonight. I'm sure you're not the only one, Kaminari says. Thanks so much for your time, you too. I'll catch up with you later. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Interview completed, they're funneled on through, finally stepping into the main doors to the hall itself. Inside, the atmosphere is lively, but less frantic. Music drifts throughout the venue from a live band, and the floor is packed with people mingling and talking. Everywhere Izuku looks, he spots familiar faces, heroes he thought he'd only ever see up close through his computer monitor. Now he's in the same room as all of them at once. It's incredible. But the most amazing thing to happen yet, probably, is when Todoroki leans closer to say quietly, Kaminari was right, actually. About what? Izuku asks, standing on his tiptoes to catch a glimpse of someone he thinks might have been Lemillion. I feel pretty damn lucky that you're here tonight, too. Izuku spins around to look at him. Todoroki just smiles, before looking away, across the hall. Want to check out the food? He asks, as though he hasn't just rocked Izuku's world once again. Food does sound good. And Izuku would follow Todoroki pretty much anywhere. So he says, lead the way. He feels like he's walking on air, all of his earlier worries suddenly seeming pointless. The night is just getting started, and whatever happens after is a million miles away, like the ground seen from the windows of an airplane. The first half of the gala is something of a blur to Izuku. There are a lot of important, impeccably dressed people that keep stopping Todoroki to talk, even if he doesn't always seem like he wants to. Fortunately, they also keep bumping into a lot of interesting heroes that Todoroki knows, for Izuku to ogle disbelievingly. He's never dreamed he would get to be in a room with this many pros at the same time. Todoroki continues to make sure Izuku is included in the conversations, despite how surprised most people seem to be meeting some young, nameless college kid at such a prestigious event. They warm up to him once they realize he's the one who saved all the children in the university villain encounter. He's not expecting so many people to recognize him, but more than just a few take the time to commend Izuku for what happened that day, until he's fairly overwhelmed by praise from all the heroes he's admired and looked up to for so long. Despite his awkwardness, Izuku finds every conversation immensely interesting, and he's content to listen in and file away as much information as he can. Todoroki, on the other hand, looks more and more fatigued after each encounter. Do you want me to get you any more food? Izuku asks him after what seems to be a particularly draining conversation with a prominent politician. Or a drink, maybe. I could use several drinks, Todoroki mutters, and then shakes his head when Izuku laughs. No, I'm fine. Sorry, this must be so damn boring for you. I swear I didn't invite you just for you to get stuck listening to a bunch of people drone on and on. It's not boring, actually, Izuku reassures him. Besides, I know it's all stuff you're obligated to do, or something. The perks of being a hero, Todoroki says. Some of my friends are great at these events, but Izuku nudges him in the side with his elbow. I think you're doing great, too. Todoroki looks surprised, so Izuku just smiles at him. He has been doing pretty great. A lot of the conversations with the political and government elite are thinly veiled requests for his public support in various areas. Navigating that minefield is tricky, but Todoroki and his resting blank face pull it off admirably. The awards should be about to start soon, Todoroki says. Actually, there is someone I wanted to introduce you to before they do. Me? Izuku asks, following him through the crowd, to one of the tables closest to the stage. There are several very high-ranking pros seated at it, though one man in particular sits with his back toward them, his face not yet visible. It's a thin back, almost skeletal, though the figure in the dark blue suit is very tall. Their hair is on the long side, a bit scraggly, going gray, though it's hard to tell for that startling shade of yellow blonde. Todoroki, Izuku starts to whisper, a strange, breathless panic overtaking him, but Todoroki is already saying very respectfully, Sensei. The man turns, and Izuku stops breathing entirely. Todoroki, my boy, Yagi Toshinori says, his shadowed eyes crinkling up at the corners in happiness, you look remarkably well. I am, Todoroki agrees. He bows to the man sitting next to Yagi. Aizawa-sensei. Don't mind me, Todoroki's other former teacher says, waving a hand tiredly. He looks like he means it. Izuku has never seen all that many pictures or videos of the reclusive underground hero, but even in a sharp black suit with his long hair pulled back, Aizawa appears remarkably exhausted. I wanted to introduce you, Todoroki says, with a nod at Izuku. Izuku barely notices that this is his cue. Internally, he is shrieking. This is like meeting Todoroki's parents. No, worse, because Endeavor may be terrifying, but this is All Might. Oh, Might. Izuku has one chance. One, to make a meaningful first impression. And he wasn't even expecting to speak to the man tonight. He wishes Todoroki had warned him so he could mentally prepare. But maybe that would have been a disaster, too, given his tendency to overthink things. What does he say? What does he say? What does he say? Hello, he says, hearing the words come out of his mouth without actually comprehending them. On Todoroki's date, time seems to slow to a near standstill. Dimly, Izuku is still aware of things occurring. Todoroki at the periphery of his vision turning towards him, Yaga's eyebrows raising, Aizawa expressionlessly taking another sip of his drink. It all seems meaningless, just like his existence. Now, his words are pinging about in his clearly empty skull, over and over. It's not a date. Mom, how many times do I have to tell you we're not going on a date? Just, he wheezes. Kidding, I didn't mean a date like a social engagement. Todoroki didn't. I mean, we're not. I don't know why I said that. Probably because I'm so freaking out right now. But I'm just his guest. This is just a normal, totally normal gala and I'm just here to be Todoroki's friend. I mean, guest. And I am so sorry. Does anyone want another drink? Some of those shrimp cocktail things. I can. It's okay, Midoriya, Todoroki says, and Izuku snaps his mouth shut. Yagi and Aizawa are still staring at him. So, Aizawa says at length, he does have a name besides Todoroki's date, then? Izuku stares numbly into space at a point somewhere above Aizawa's ear, and even though his name is no longer worth mentioning, mumbles, why yes, it's Midoriya Izuku, Yagi says kindly. Izuku flounders soundlessly, like a fish left out of water for far too long. All Might said his full name. All Might knows his name. Yes, Yaga's eyes crinkle again. His face is honestly kind of terrifying. Izuku has to admit, but also somehow very kind. He hasn't seen much of All Might up close after his decline, years ago. After the horrible fight with All for One, a villain most of the rest of the world hadn't even realized existed until that night. Maybe the heroes had wanted to keep All Might's memory, his legacy, as close to intact as they could. Izuku feels a very pronounced sadness over this. Not that Yagi has waned in the way that he has, because all people do, even heroes. But standing in front of him now, Izuku doesn't feel the slightest bit different about the man he's wanted to be like all his life. Even gaunt around the edges, All Might's smile is real. I was hoping I'd see you here tonight, Yagi says. Me? Izuku asks. He knows All Might doesn't lie, but how is he supposed to believe that? But Yagi laughs. Of course. Imagine my surprise when I heard you say I was your favorite hero. I felt very well represented. You saw that interview. Izuku gasps. The thought is vaguely horrifying. He'd been so himself in it. I was very curious about you, I'll admit, Yagi says. Shouto was so taken with you that I had to. Sensei. Todoroki hurriedly interrupts, and Yagi's smile widens as Izuku swivels his head back and forth between them. Sorry, Yagi says, just an old man rambling. Mostly, what I wanted to tell you tonight is thank you. Izuku shakes his head, shocked. For what? For putting yourself in danger to save others, Yagi says, including the life of one of my former students. But that was. Izuku swallows. I was just in the right place at the right time. That's all it ever is, for the most part, Yagi says. No, it's really thanks to you, and Shouto, too, and other real heroes. Izuku clasps his hands together nervously. He doesn't know how to accept this. Thanks from someone who has done so much, when Izuku has done so little. Yagi's brow furrows, and Izuku wonders if he said something wrong. I don't understand, the man says. I wasn't there that day. You were alone when you did what you did. I know, but I was able to do it because of everything I've learned about you, because of you. Izuku explains. That's why I admire you so much. You inspire people to do that kind of thing, even someone like me. My boy, that's not how it works. If it hadn't been for you, young Midoriya, Yagi says, his voice suddenly more forceful, enough that Izuku can't help but listen. Believe me when I tell you, even if you'd never heard of me, you would still have found a way to do what you did. Izuku worries the bottom of his suit jacket will be irreversibly crumpled with how hard he's clutching it. He's always believed in All Might, all his life. So why is this time so difficult? How do you know that? No one, not even I, could ever make someone else a hero, Yagi says, with complete certainty. The only way for any of us to become one is through our own actions. Speechless, Izuku stares at him. His eyes feel hot and go blurry a moment later. All Might just called him a hero. The lights dim, and an announcement for people to begin taking their seats for the awards portion of the evening is made. Thanks, Sensei, Todoroki says. He puts a warm hand across Izuku's back again, as much to steady him as to get him moving. Izuku swipes at his eyes, and bows to Yagi and Aizawa as deeply as he can without looking ridiculous. Thank you for everything, he says. He doesn't know what else he could say that would ever be adequate. I am honored to have been your hero, my boy, Yagi tells him. Izuku dares to look him right in the eye. You're still my favorite hero." Taken aback by the force behind his words, Yagi laughs before glancing at Todoroki. "I do wonder how long that will last." Izuku starts to ask, but the lights dim again, and they've got to get to their table before they wind up stranded. Izuku sits in his seat numbly. Present Mike has already bounded onto the stage to the podium, but Izuku barely hears what he's shouting. He's still working out what just happened. Even just the fact that he got to talk to All Might is almost too great to comprehend. Never mind the fact that All Might believes in him somehow. Despite everything people have said, despite even what Todoroki has said, Izuku can't quite buy into his own hype. He can acknowledge that he made a difference, and he realizes he saved Todoroki's life and the schoolgirl, Hana. For that, he's especially grateful. But since then, it's felt like people are trying to insist that Izuku is something he's not. He's never felt like a hero, just a scared boy who stumbled his way into a lucky solution. The most nerve-wracking part of this is that it makes him feel like all Todoroki's reassurances and time and friendship are the result of something with no real basis. When he's at his most anxious, it still makes him feel like he's tricking Todoroki somehow, and that at any moment, Todoroki will realize it too, and Izuku will no longer be worth his attention. But All Might is the hero, the greatest hero who ever lived. He knows what it means to be one. And Izuku has never doubted him before. There's something in what he said that feels different. Izuku had even talked about it himself, when he'd recalled Todoroki shielding them without a quirk to defend himself. It wasn't about the situation or the stakes, but the choice. "Are you okay?" Izuku jumps slightly, broken out of his daze. He turns to look, and there's Todoroki, leaning in close with a frown. It's dark, hopefully too dark to see that Izuku is crying, but not quite dark enough that Izuku can't see the concern in his eyes, light and dark, illuminated by the reflection from the lights on the stage. And suddenly, he realizes that Todoroki doesn't just see a kid with skinny wrists and watery eyes and no quirk to speak of, a fleeting media sensation with nothing else remotely remarkable about him. Todoroki doesn't see everything Izuku isn't, or can't be. He sees everything Izuku aspires to be. He sees a hero in him. Todoroki always looks at Izuku as though Izuku is something he's never seen before. Izuku realizes his hands are shaking and clenches them together in his lap. They're announcing the first award category, Rescue of the Year, already, and Todoroki is supposed to be paying attention to that, not him. "I'm okay," Izuku says, smiling at Todoroki to show he means it. He's so okay that it kind of hurts. "I'm really good." Todoroki nods and then, tentatively, lowers his hand over both of Izuku's. He does it softly, the warmth of his palm settling in hesitant degrees, like he's afraid if he moves too swift or too sudden, the spell will be broken and Izuku will be gone. Izuku stares down at their hands, too stunned to speak once again. Todoroki's hand is heavy over his, and his fingers are long and slender. He can easily cover both of Izuku's hands with one of his own. He squeezes, and the weight and pressure makes the trembling of Izuku's fingers start to subside. "If you're my date," Todoroki murmurs, "is it all right to hold your hand?" Izuku bites his lip as he feels laughter bubbling up inside him. "Geez, Todoroki-san," he whispers back. "I panicked." "I know," Todoroki says. "You knew I would." "I did. I'm sorry." Izuku exhales slowly. He turns his hand upwards so that his palm is pressed to Todoroki's. "It's all right with me. If it's all right with you." Todoroki smiles a tiny smile of his own and keeps his hand resting over Izuku's as Present Mike checks the results. Rescue of the Year goes to. A pause for dramatic effect. Shouto. The room bursts into applause and Izuku gasps so hard he almost chokes. Ecstatic, he literally pops up onto his feet, wriggling his hand free from Todoroki's to clap with everyone else, before realizing that Todoroki isn't moving. He seems to just be opting for sitting there looking surprised and mildly baffled. "Todoroki-san," Izuku squeals, pulling on his arm to get him to stand. "You have to go accept the award." He decides to only say "I told you so" in his head, because he's too happy to really try and hold it over Todoroki. He watches Todoroki take the stage, can't help but admire how drop-dead gorgeous he looks under the lights. Truly a job well done, Izuku thinks proudly. If all his accumulation of fanboy knowledge results in nothing beyond that suit, he'll still be happy. Todoroki leans into the mic and clears his throat. Izuku can tell he feels awkward. He's known Todoroki's body language well even before spending so much time with him in person, but the straight-backed way he's standing and emotionless expression give it away immediately. "This is really surprising," Todoroki says, in his most deadpan voice, and the whole audience laughs. It makes him snort, too. And he smiles a bit, reluctantly, at first, before his eyes flick over to where Izuku is sitting. Izuku gives him the tiniest of waves and a thumbs up. And Todoroki's shoulders relax a fraction. "Actually, I was convinced I wouldn't be winning anything tonight. But then a friend talked some sense into me. So I do have something planned out to say." He clears his throat, before continuing. He thanks All Might and his old teachers, the group that works for him at his hero agency, the organizers of the gala and awards ceremony. He thanks Endeavor, too, very belatedly. Izuku will ask him later if he really almost forgot or if that was intentional. He mentions how he never really would have been able to anticipate winning something like this during his years at UA, and that he's glad to have been given the opportunity. He's nearing the wrap-up point when he pauses to say one last thing. I realize I've said more than most people have ever heard me talk in one go, so I swear I'm almost done. More laughs from the crowd follow this statement, and Todoroki finds Izuku among them one more time. I do need to talk about Midoriya Izuku. Izuku, who has been watching him fondly with his chin propped on his hand, nearly slams his face into the table when his elbow slips off the edge as he startles in surprise. Midoriya, this would have been a posthumous award if you hadn't been there. This startles even more laughs out of everyone as Izuku puts a hand over his face. He cannot believe Todoroki would joke about that now. But you did, and because of that I'm here. And I'm glad that I won tonight, so I could prove you right. I can gratefully accept this because of you, and I wanted to win it for you, as a thank you for saving me, and for believing in me since the start. He steps back from the mic and bows, as Izuku proceeds to have a mini heart attack. He wants to cover his bright red face, but he also can't take his eyes off Todoroki as the hero jogs down the stairs probably a little faster than is necessary. Izuku stares at him with wide eyes up until he drops back down into his seat at the table, looking very relieved to have that over with. He looks at Izuku, who instantly looks away with a squeak. Then, worried that that's too rude, he tears his gaze back. Todoroki is watching him. I embarrassed you, Todoroki says, very quietly. Yeah, Izuku whispers. I wasn't expecting that. I needed to say it, Todoroki says. I'm not sure that's true, Izuku says, but I still liked your speech. Really, MMHM, Izuku says. He hesitates before turning his hand palm up on his lap. He's not even sure Todoroki is looking. A second later, Todoroki takes his hand again. The awards are extremely fun to watch. Gravity does end up grabbing the award for most popular, while Ground Zero very proudly brings home the high honor of Hero Performance of the Year. Many of Todoroki's classmates are nominated or winners in their categories. Izuku is very satisfied to see most of his predictions for the winners come true. There's also the fact that he gets to hold Todoroki's hand the entire duration of the awards ceremony. He's not sure what he's going to tell his mom after this. Is it really a date, then, even if he's the one who accidentally called it that first? Todoroki didn't disagree. Also, he seems to want to hold Izuku's nervous, sweaty hands. Besides being an act of martyrdom in and of itself, that's a whole new level of closeness between them that Todoroki was willing to initiate. Izuku can't really think about these details for too long without feeling like he's going to spontaneously combust, so he tries to focus very hard on the awards being presented. It can't last forever though, and eventually Present Mike is screaming out a last thank you and goodnight before the lights come back up and the band begins to play again. The audience still lingers to talk and congratulate the winners, and more people come up to chat with Todoroki. Shouto, Zero calls as he sweeps by on his way out. See you at the after party. Maybe, Todoroki says. Oh, come on, after party, Izuku asks, peering at Todoroki curiously. Yeah, my old class has one every year, Todoroki explains. But we don't have to go if that's not. I can too, Izuku demands. Yes, guests are invited, Todoroki says, blinking at his fervor. Do you want? Izuku grabs his arm. Todoroki-san, your class, Yui's most promising generation. Okay. Todoroki agrees, as Izuku shakes him with a manic passion. Right, I should have expected that, I guess. Yes, Izuku yelps, punching the air in his excitement. This is the best night of my life. The Yui class after party is at a fancy hotel nearby, but apparently not heavily publicized or open to press. They've reserved the penthouse for the evening, a beautiful sprawling space that is already rambunctiously loud by the time Todoroki and Izuku turn up. Several people shout out to them when they walk in, drinks raised in greeting. It's a good thing Izuku already met All Might earlier in the evening, because by now, his breaking point has been reached. If it hadn't, he thinks the sheer combined presence of the people in this room would have knocked him unconscious. Izuku-kun, Uraraka calls over the heads of her former classmates. She holds up her statuette, pointing to it animatedly. You were right, Izuku waves back, thrilled to even be acknowledged by anyone. He's barely thought this when a second later someone is slinging an arm over his shoulders affably. Glad you guys made it, Zero says, his grin as wide as ever. Todoroki, you decided not to go into old man mode. Ha! Loudly, he whispers to Izuku. When we were still in school he used to go to bed before 9, like, every night. So responsible, Todoroki-san, Izuku exclaims. Zero sighs. Okay, I'm clearly trying to mock you in front of the wrong demographic here. I always come to our class parties, Todoroki says mildly, unbothered by being poked fun at. Yeah, but we weren't sure if you had other plans tonight. Obviously, Zero says, as Kaminari, joined by the recognizably pink Ishido Mina, strolls up to join them. Kaminari wiggles his eyebrows at Izuku. Sorry, Midoriya, we didn't hijack your man, did we? My what? Izuku stammers. Though, I wanted to come, too. Oh, he's cute and a party animal. Ashido crows, ignoring the fact that Izuku is clearly anything but. He needs a drink. I'll take that, Todoroki says, intercepting the beer she passes to Izuku, who is still a few months shy of the drinking age. Ashido makes disappointed noises as Todoroki drains half of it in one go. Awa, nobody's gonna care. Let him have some fun. I'm having fun, Izuku reassures her. He really is. And even with Japan's practically non-existent underage drinking regulations, he doesn't want to risk getting Todoroki in trouble for letting him loose on the open bar. Not to mention, Izuku is absolutely sure he'd be an embarrassment if he got drunk surrounded by so many of his idols. So it's probably best to play it safe. Kaminari laughs. You're too good to this guy, Midoriya. Don't let him cramp your style. All right, I won't. Izuku chirps, which makes the other three laugh. We'd all be lost without your guidance, Denki, Todoroki says dryly. Kaminari flashes them the most exaggerated wink Izuku's ever witnessed before Mina and Siro drift off to chat with some of their other friends. Shouto-kun, someone calls out excitedly. And more familiar faces hurry to greet them, two people Izuku recognizes as Todoroki's closest friends from Yui, Yaoyorozu Momo and Ida Tenya. For a few moments, Izuku is too starstruck to even introduce himself properly. Like Todoroki, Yaoyorozu and Ida are basically pro-hero royalty. Both of them are as towering as he is and equally as beautiful in their formal wear. Being surrounded by the three of them makes Izuku feel a little bit like a sentient potato, but a very happy potato nonetheless. Ida moves his arms around just as much in real life as he does on TV, and Izuku has a hard time not watching the sharp cuts he makes with his hands as he animatedly congratulates Todoroki on his award. In Midoriya-kun, Ada suddenly blares. I'm delighted to be able to make the acquaintance of one as admirable as yourself. Shouto has spoken very highly of you to us. Ah, me as well, Izuku says, flustered. I can't believe I get to meet you both. I've always thought you're both incredible heroes, and Todoroki-san has told me so much about you. They both look extremely touched. We were thrilled when Todoroki-san told us you would be joining him tonight, Yaoyorozu tells him. We've been looking forward to meeting you for so long. Oh, really? Izuku squeaks. He hopes it isn't proving to be a letdown, given he hasn't done much beyond stare at everyone in awe. Oh, yes, Yaoyorozu gushes. It's the first time he's ever been so fond of someone. We wanted to talk to you ourselves, of course, but Ochako already told us girls all about you, so I'm just so happy. That's so nice of her. Izuku practically wails. We all think you two look very cute together, Yaoyorozu says, delicately putting her fingers to her mouth as she smiles. Izuku wheezes. How much wine have you had, Momo? Todoroki asks, and then deftly dodges the swat she aims at his arm. This is my first glass, she says indignantly. You're working faster than me, it looks like. Todoroki's response is a very long and defiant drink from his beer. Unlike most of the discussions he'd been dragged into during the gala, Todoroki seems quite content to let his old friends sweep him away into various topics of conversation. They talk about the past year, hero rankings, reminisce on their school days. Izuku hangs on every word, and instead of feeling like an outsider, finds them all eager to share the impressive laundry list of their exploits with him. In fairness, he's a very good audience of one. He's never even heard half these stories, like the quirk apprehension tests their very first day of class, or their 2-on-2 hero versus villain fights. Todoroki is also probably the most relaxed Izuku has seen him around other people, besides Eiko, and more recently, Izuku himself. Todoroki does still retain an air of respectfulness around the two of them that he drops entirely with his former classmates, likely out of self-preservation. They're all ruthlessly overfamiliar with him and look for every opportunity to find something to tease him about. It's also probably saying something that he's several beers in. His responses to teasing have become less reserved and more hilarious with every bottle, and his cheeks are a very telling shade of pink. It's kind of unbearably cute, in Izuku's opinion. It's not like that magazine shoot was my first choice, he explains adamantly to Jiro and Takoyami at one point, who are both snickering at his attempts. Izuku has never actually seen Takoyami smile. In any pictures, it's pretty weird seeing him laugh. Aoyama is persuasive. You know that better than anyone. Yes, Takoyami admits, but that is also why I always say I'm busy when he starts proposing his schemes of dark design. Dude, no judgment though, Jiro says innocently. It was a good spread. Shut up, Todoroki says, finishing off his beer. I'm serious, Jiro insists. Midoriya agrees with me, right? Ooh, Izuku says, trapped unexpectedly. The photo shoot in question had basically been a vanity piece for luxury products, featuring several of the hero world's most eligible bachelors. Todoroki had been very handsome in it, and also very inexplicably shirtless, and Izuku has those pictures burned into his brain at this point. Not a question you have to answer, Todoroki says sagely. No, I think he does, Jiro says. But before Izuku can say anything in response, a new challenger approaches. Oi! The shout is loud and sharp and pretty unmistakable. Izuku freezes, shoulders hunching up around his ears. Todoroki shakes his head. Here we go, he sighs. Most people in the room literally clear the way as Bakugo Katsuki stomps his way down the center of the room, right toward them. His husband follows behind him at a more leisurely pace, in a full red suit no less. Kirishima grabs Kaminari to hug him and fist bumps Zero as he passes with a brilliant grin. Bakugo doesn't say hello to anyone until he reaches Todoroki and Izuku, where he stops in front of them, sizing them up. Yo, Todoroki says. Half and half, Bakugo barks in return. His distinctive glare is absolutely terrifying up close. Without so much as another word between them, the two top pros go from a stare down to grinning at each other like old friends, which, of course, they are. The F is wrong with you? Bakugo asks, like he's asking Todoroki how he's been doing. Trying to get yourself killed abroad without a word to any of us, you damn lunatic. You're right, I should have run it by you first, Todoroki says. Todoroki, Kirishima yells, draping an arm around Todoroki's neck. New rule, you gotta at least be in Japan if you're gonna wind up in the hospital. Don't scare us like that. I wasn't scared, Bakugo says. He's fine, look at him. I was fine, Todoroki confirms, as he accepts another beer from Kirishima. Bakugo and Todoroki have one of the most famous public pro rivalries, stemming from their time at Yui as two of its strongest students since they both set foot on campus. Their similar attitude problems in the early days only served to cement them as two peas in a pod, regardless of the fact that they tended to be at each other's throats, though they evened out into something resembling friendship over the years. The undercurrent of competitiveness is never far below the surface with the two of them. Hang on a sec, Bakugo says, squinting at Izuku. You're the little sheet that did that impression of me, aren't you? Oh, crap, Izuku had practically forgotten about that. I might have done that. Yeah, he says. It was on request, though. Bakugo stares at him a moment longer, and Izuku feels himself breaking out into a nervous sweat. Then the explosion hero throws his head back and laughs uproariously. That was pretty good, kid. He cackles, jamming a heavy hand down on Izuku's head to ruffle his hair like a pleased older brother. So much for all the hard work of Izuku's hairstylists. Izuku puts a hand over his racing heart. Oh, thank God. Wait, you're not mad. Nah, Bakugo says. A true fan should damn well know my catchphrase. Since when is your catchphrase die, scum? Todoroki asks. That's not my catchphrase, Bakugo says, frowning. His catchphrase is just die, actually. Izuku pipes up. Todoroki stares dully into the distance. I shouldn't be surprised by this, and yet, Bakugo scoffs. Quit actin' all high and mighty, you're just as dramatic. Izuku can't quite stifle the giggle that escapes him, causing Todoroki to fake glare at him instead. Sorry, don't apologize to this a-hole. Bakugo snaps sharply. You know he's way more trouble than me, right? He tell you about the time he told the chief of police to go F himself. What? Izuku gasps, in language somewhat less uncouth than Bakugo-kun's interpretation. Ada interjects from nearby, where he is eavesdropping, but I can confirm this is true. There was a slight misunderstanding, Todoroki says. You tried to fight him. Bakugo wheezes. Bakugo is unsurprisingly very eager to tell embarrassing stories about Todoroki. It turns out he's heard more about Izuku than he lets on at first, eventually revealing that he knows Izuku went to his old middle school, which leads to the two of them discussing their shared hometown. He's also about as demanding as can be expected, and keeps insisting Izuku show him and Kirishima more hero impressions, which cracks them both up every time. It's only when Bakugo asks to see his pro-hero Shouto impersonation that Izuku realizes Todoroki is actually not standing next to him anymore. He looks around, confused, before finally spotting Todoroki sitting on one of the huge sofas, slightly isolated from all the commotion. I promise I'll show you later, he tells Bakugo, who is becoming slightly belligerent in his now inebriated state. Kirishima ushers him away laughingly, as Izuku makes his way over to where Todoroki is sitting, with his head tilted back, eyes closed. He's undone the top button of his suit shirt, and his collarbones and the smooth column of his throat are exposed. Izuku swallows. Hi, he says, and Todoroki opens his eyes to look at him. His gaze is a bit fuzzy, eyes lidded, and Izuku fights back a smile. Tipsy. I wanted to sit down for a bit and it looked like you were. Fine. Todoroki's shoulders rise and fall in a shrug. Yeah, that was. I can't believe I got to talk to him for so long. Izuku says giddily. He really can't believe it. Not just because Ground Zero is another of his favorite heroes, but because he'd never imagined one of the most intimidating pros would even care to talk to him for more than a few seconds at a time, let alone be interested in an actual conversation. He's really not as bad as everyone thinks, Todoroki says. Well, not anymore, anyway. He's another favorite of yours, right? Izuku nods emphatically, and Todoroki gets a funny look, like he wants to frown and knows he shouldn't. Izuku tilts his head, confused at first, as Todoroki glances away and takes another sip of his beer. Is everything okay? I'm not in danger of slipping to third place on your list, am I? Todoroki asks, blinking up at him. Third place on his. Wait, oh my god, is Todoroki actually? You won't, Izuku says. Of course you aren't. Todoroki-san, you're not, or are you? Drunk, definitely at least halfway there. But jealous. Izuku doesn't think he can actually voice that aloud. The reality of a world in which Todoroki could be jealous of someone else getting Izuku's attention seems so far off that he can't bring himself to imagine it. But, sorry, Todoroki says abruptly. God, that was a really, never mind, I don't know why I want some company while you're over here. Izuku blurts out. Todoroki's face is considerably redder than before. Is that still just from the alcohol? Yeah, Todoroki says. Please. Izuku smiles. He wonders if he should try to see if Todoroki wants to hold his hand here, too, and if that would make him feel better. Or maybe there's too many of his eagle-eyed friends watching. Izuku is pondering this so intently that he doesn't notice there's a tipped-over bottle on the floor next to the couch until he steps on it and his feet fly out from under him. Izuku, he's saved, once again, from an embarrassing fate by Todoroki's reflexes. The pro hero grabs him before he can tumble over backwards to the floor, or crack his head on the coffee table. Before Izuku knows what's happening, he finds himself being hauled into Todoroki's lap. One strong arm wrapped firmly around his body, his back pressed to Todoroki's chest. For a second, he doesn't dare speak. That's the second time today, Todoroki remarks. Izuku can feel the warmth of his breath against his ear. He can't help it, he shivers. As sorry, he whispers. Thanks. He doesn't think they've ever been this close before. Not even when this same thing had happened on the plane. God, Todoroki is going to think he's doing this on purpose. He hadn't been holding Izuku quite so firmly then. And Izuku starts to scoot off his lap, face burning in shame, but Todoroki's arm around his waist tightens. Maybe you should stay here, he says. Barely a whisper, like he's not sure he should be saying it. Izuku's breath catches in his throat. If you want, it might be safer. Izuku closes his eyes. This is likely the closest he will ever get to heaven, and he's not ready to leave just yet. And so, even though it's horrible of him, because Todoroki has obviously had a bit too much to drink, and probably currently doesn't have the best judgment, Izuku says, okay, I will. He feels, rather than sees, Todoroki nod. If you wanted to go talk to other people, though, that's fine. I wouldn't be, I'm not. I'd like to stay with you, Izuku tells him. Another nod. Okay, with my second favorite hero. He feels the huff of Todoroki's laugh flutter against the back of his neck. Izuku's chest is tight from how inflated his heart has become. All Might did say that could change, Todoroki reminds him. Izuku has to grin at this. You're welcome to try, Todoroki-san. So quietly, Izuku almost doesn't hear him. Todoroki murmurs, maybe I have been trying. Izuku doesn't get a chance to respond. They are waylaid by more of Todoroki's friends shortly thereafter, and Izuku scrambles off his lap to save him any unnecessary embarrassment. He still spends the rest of the party sitting pressed up against Todoroki's side, with Todoroki's arm draped over the back of the couch behind him. Todoroki doesn't seem to be the least bit bothered with subtlety, and Izuku is left to replay his words over and over in his head. All Might himself has already called him a hero that night. Maybe there are other impossible things that might not be as far out of reach as he thought. The after-party doesn't wind down until late. It's nearly 3 in the morning when they finally get back to their hotel. Izuku is exhausted, worn out from excitement and more interaction over the course of one evening than he's probably ever had before in his life, all with a group of people so much larger than life they're literally on billboards all across his city. He's grown up hoping to get so much as an autograph from any of them. Tonight, he got phone numbers. And more than that, he got to know them a little bit. The old saying warns against meeting your heroes, but he's more than glad that he did. He walks down the hallway of the hotel side by side with Todoroki, footsteps swallowed up by the plush carpet beneath their feet. Todoroki is quiet next to him, and Izuku feels overly aware of how close they're standing. Their hands by their sides almost touching, but not quite. Todoroki-san, he says, did you enjoy yourself tonight? Todoroki glances at him. Shouldn't I be the one asking you that? I feel like maybe the pressure is more on you, Izuku says. We both knew I'd have fun. Does that mean you did, then? Yes, Izuku says. Of course. This was amazing. Todoroki looks pleased. Good. That doesn't answer my question, though, Izuku wheedles. Todoroki doesn't respond for a few seconds. Finally, he says, I wasn't sure if I should invite you to the gala or not. The admission comes as suddenly as a slap. Oh, Izuku says, the happy bubble in his chest deflating. He trips over his next words as old doubts surge back in. Oh, I hope you didn't feel like you had to. Or like you were pressured in any way, or... No, I've just never asked anyone to an event before, Todoroki explains. I wasn't sure what you'd think. Honestly, I wasn't really sure what I was thinking, either. I just wanted. They've reached the door to Izuku's room, and Todoroki trails off as they stop in front of it. Wanted what? Izuku asks. His throat is tight. He's not sure what to feel. Everything had seemed like it was going so great, too good to be true. Had Todoroki just been humoring him all this time? Had he just felt bad for Izuku? Todoroki pauses. He rests his fist on the wall and then thumps it a few times, seemingly for good measure, before looking up at Izuku again. The cloudiness has disappeared from his expression. Any lingering effects from the alcohol appeared to have worn off. I just wanted to be around you more, he says. First the interview, then at the agency, then just talking to you over the phone every time. I just didn't want any of them to be the last time. What? Oh, Izuku whispers. I knew inviting you to this would be a lot, Todoroki confesses. I didn't know if it was too much or what would happen after. You already said it's been the best night of your life, so I know I can't really. I can't top this. Wait, Izuku says, was the gala to try and impress me? No, Todoroki says. He sighs, running a hand over his face. I'm bad at this. I don't know what else to offer beyond this. You like hero stuff and this was a lot of hero stuff. Todoroki-san, Izuku says, shocked. You know I don't just like you because you're a pro, right? That's the entire reason you like me, actually. Todoroki points out, sounding very stressed. It is not, Izuku says. I know about you because you're a hero. I like you because of everything else about you. What, did you think I was just going to lose interest once we ran out of hero stuff to do? He stares Todoroki down, daring him to argue. No, Todoroki says hurriedly. I know you're not like that. You don't expect anything, but you should. You deserve this much. Izuku hides his face in the crook of his elbow. You're being ridiculous. What's ridiculous is that you think I'm amazing, Todoroki says. But I can't even. I've been trying to tell you, to make you realize that goddamn it. He runs a hand through his carefully styled hair in frustration, mussing it up hopelessly as Izuku watches, stunned. I want to do all of this for you, but I can't even come up with something better than an agency tour and a free ticket I never would have even used otherwise to some party. Todoroki, Izuku yelps, cutting him off very rudely, but Izuku doesn't care at the moment. Just tell me, did you enjoy tonight, or not? Yes, Todoroki says. So did I, Izuku tells him. I mean, yes, tonight was the best night of my life, how could it not be? But not just because of all the hero stuff. It's mainly because I had a lot of fun with you. And if you somehow think that's not good enough for me, you are an idiot. Todoroki's eyes are very wide. Yeah, Izuku says. I like you a lot, Todoroki-san. Okay, Todoroki says. Okay. I like you a lot is the biggest understatement ever made. Perhaps an outright lie at this point. Izuku's heart is so full of fondness that it's threatening to hammer out of his chest. He has to do something about it, or it's going to explode, messy and rose-colored, all over the immaculate hotel hallway. He leans up onto his tiptoes. But he's still not quite tall enough, so he has to grab the lapels of Todoroki's jacket and tug him down a few inches. Briefly, trying not to think too much about it, he presses his mouth against Todoroki's in the quickest, softest kiss. It's the first one he's ever given anyone. Good night, Todoroki-san, he whispers. Thank you again for everything. Rapidly, he lets himself into his room, bowing to Todoroki's feet as he closes the door behind him. He leans back against it and stares up at the ceiling, and then squeezes his eyes shut. He just did that. What did he just do? Knock, knock, knock. The sound makes him leap away from the door. Oh, no. He stares at the glossy wood until the knock comes again, light and frantic, and it seems like he has no choice but to face fate. With a trembling hand, he reaches out and opens the door again, eyes still downcast. I'm sore. That's all he gets out. The door is flung wide open. Todoroki takes one step forward, and then two big hands are cupping Izuku's cheeks to tilt his face up. Warm lips are finding his, and Todoroki is kissing him in earnest, body pressed flush up against Izuku's own. Izuku. The way he says Izuku's name against his lips is all kinds of ruined, and the sound of it makes Izuku sob. A wordless gasp of pent-up longing and adoration all flooding out of him at once, and he's shaking, and his legs don't seem to be able to support him, and he's flinging his arms as tight as he can around Todoroki's neck as his hero in all things picks him up and carries him into the moonlit room beyond, kicking the door shut behind them so they can finally have each other. A morning entertainment channel plays on the hotel room television, but neither Izuku nor Todoroki are paying very much attention to it. Are you sure? Yes, Todoroki-san. If you keep asking, I'm going to change my mind. Okay. I just want to make sure you're comfortable. Well, it'll feel a little weird, but I don't mind if it's you. A knock on the door announcing the arrival of room service makes Izuku startle and look up from his phone. Accept my follow request. Todoroki tells him, hopping out of bed. He grabs one of the plush hotel robes to slip on, but not before Izuku gets another glance at the masterpiece that is his bare ass. Todoroki seems to have no qualms with wandering around the room entirely nude, but Izuku still feels shy. Fortunately, Todoroki has loaned him one of his undershirts, which is so big on Izuku that he can practically swim in it. He's been rolling around in it all morning, in the bed that they've yet to vacate, because Todoroki is VIP enough to get away with checking out whenever he wants. They aren't flying back until that evening. Afternoon plans include savoring some of the best food Hokkaido has to offer. Morning plans include savoring more of each other. This has, however, resulted in Izuku's Twitter being brought up again, to his dismay. He would have gladly avoided the subject forever, but it's much harder to do when Todoroki asks him innocently if Izuku would consider adding him now, lying with his head pillowed on Izuku's stomach, his shoulders just looking the way they do. Izuku had capitulated, because Todoroki must have realized at this point that Izuku is as thirsty for him as a man in the middle of the desert with no water supply. There shouldn't be any surprises on his Twitter, especially not after last night. Still, he is acutely nervous, watching Todoroki heft the breakfast tray in one hand as he closes the door behind him with his foot, making his way back over to the bed. "Oh, wow," Izuku says, momentarily distracted by the impressive array of options on each plate. Todoroki checks his phone. "Ah, you accepted." He clicks on Izuku's profile and starts scrolling. "Don't look at it now," Izuku screeches. "Why not?" Todoroki asks. "When did you even get the chance to retweet this much meta about the winners of the awards last night?" "Before you woke up," Izuku says. He may be a private account, but he likes to keep his timeline updated for his own analysis purposes. Todoroki looks like he's trying not to smile when something must catch his eye. He squints at his phone screen. "Is this a photo set of my back muscles?" Izuku chokes on the quail egg he just started eating. Izuku, do you follow an entire Twitter dedicated to my? They post a lot of up-to-the-minute updates about you." Izuku shrieks, diving at Todoroki to grab his phone. The entire breakfast tray nearly gets overturned in the ensuing scuffle, which ends with Izuku lying flat on top of Todoroki, pinning the pro-hero's arms above his head to prevent him from finding even more damning evidence. Izuku suspects Todoroki let him win. "I'm not too bothered," Todoroki says, his expression sly. "I'm just glad I could catch your eye in the way I have." "Todoroki-san," Izuku tells him, leaning in to kiss him, "shut up." In the background, the talk show still plays, now airing footage of the gala. The glitz and glamour of the event has been captured from every angle, and what many stations seem most interested in focusing on is the subject of Todoroki's unexpected guest. They replay Todoroki's and Izuku's arrival on the red carpet, the interview with Kaminari, their interactions with other heroes inside the hall. Pictures and video have surfaced of Izuku speaking to All Might, though the media seem to have been prevented from getting close enough to overhear their conversation. And Todoroki's acceptance speech has been repeated almost non-stop, on every outlet, every social media platform. Most of the cameras were trained on him, but there are some videos that show Izuku's reactions. In case how he felt about Todoroki wasn't obvious to people already, it is now, by the way Izuku watches him. Izuku might have been embarrassed by that before. Now he just thinks it's easier than having to tell everyone himself. ... And I wanted to win it for you, as a thank you for saving me, and for believing in me since the start. Todoroki's voice plays over the speakers, and then the two TV show hosts are back, familiar voices waxing sentimental about the entire thing. "Wah," Mori says, "it feels like it really came full circle. The whole story is incredible." Kanda agrees. The two of them truly are remarkable. The program continues on, though the two people the hosts are discussing have more important things to do and don't hear it. But if they had, they would agree. Remarkable is a pretty good word for it, after all. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.